Okay, good evening. The planning board meeting for Tuesday, April 19th will come to order. We have a pretty full agenda tonight. Every item that is on the list will be discussed or heard, so there's no postponements. And right now, we're going to start in order. And the first item will be annual town meeting warrant article 24 capital improvement plan. And Bruce, I believe you're here.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Everybody.
So everyone should have the planning board report in their packet. It's article number 24, number report.
Yeah, Jean, what do they have? I have the page numbers from the book, so something they can follow or...
15 was on that.
Okay.
16, yeah.
Of course, I'm only going to do the public works ones, obviously. You can ask me questions about the others. Good, thanks.
Yep.
All right. You set?
Yes.
Okay. The first one that I'm talking with is the roadway improvements, as I do every year, 1.2 million. Again, it's the plan we put in every year and work at the 5-year plan. I don't know if you have any questions on that. Same thing with the sidewalk reconstruction. We do about $75,000 a year on that, and it's reconstruction, not new sidewalks. So I think I've said this before years ago. We decided to, rather than build new ones, take care of the ones that we have. So that's what we've been working towards, about $75,000.
Balance left in our...
Yes, a little bit. And I used, in the 75, I used some of that in, so the 75,000 that's in here uses money that's appropriated at town meeting plus money from the sidewalk fund. So we used both of them. So there might be like, I forget what it is, John, exactly, but I don't know if it's in, usually on the sheets that we put in, we have a place to put what's coming from the CIP and what's coming from other. And I don't know if that's the case with this one, but that's what we use.
On the roads, are all the ones on the road list, we're not going to call legacy roads, not. I'm just curious if there's anything on the list that's like a subdivision that's been done in the last 30 years where you've...
There probably is, because the way I do it, I use the Chapter 90 on the main roads, and then the local funds that we get, it's a division between Chapter 90. We get about $400,000 from town meeting, and those I use for subdivision, what I call the subdivision roads, are the roads that we'd never get to with Chapter 90.
Okay, but I'm thinking, is it more like some of the old roads downtown, or is it not?
No, it's a combination of a lot of things. So...
You know, a little bit what I'm trying to get at here is if there's any sort of subdivisions we've done over the last 30 years that maybe the roads haven't come out well, we should learn what we should learn from that, you know, if any of them were done prior to their normal life.
They very well could be, and you know, I'm at a loss at that, because the way we do it is each road is rated from 0 to 100, and I work it on the rating, not whether you know, it's been done in 30 years or 20 years. It's what the rating is. So there, I got to tell you, there's probably some that were probably didn't have a good base and things, but those are the ones that I think that are pretty old. They'd have to be 20 plus years old. Yeah.
But how does one get the road on it? Just personally, every year you come here, and I ask you every year.
Here's what I wish you would do, and I just thought about this.
My neighborhood complaint.
Can I answer your question? Thank you. You hit me with it as I walked in, all right? You hit me with it last year. I got a whole list of things here. I'm thinking about a whole list of things that I need to talk to the board about. Email me. I'll figure out where your rating is, and I'll let you know, all right? I tell my people and I tell everybody, you know, if you need something from DPW, call us or email us, all right? Don't hit us when we're out somewhere at something else, and it makes it very difficult. And I apologize if I get led. I'm upset with myself because I might have led you astray last year. So, all right, I'm sorry if I'm a little, but... It just gets me mad when I do it, and I tell my people not to do it, all right? So if you email me, please, and I'll look where the rating is. And what happens a lot of times on these roads, too, just so real quick, it's the total road. Segments might be bad, but we look at the total road. So some sections of the road might be good. So if there are some bad sections, we might be able to go in and just patch some of that with our crews. So we can do some of that, right? Where are we? We're in the, you all set with the question, John? I could
yeah,
kind of
that's
take a
fine.
look at that, but I don't know when.
I mean,
I don't know the dates of the subdivisions because I've only been here 8 years. So.
Again, it's probably something worth doing in the fullness of time. It's a way to evaluate the quality of our process. You know, because after all, the whole idea is, you know, as part of the subdivision process, is we build roads that are meant to last.
Yep.
And if, in some cases, it hasn't happened, we should learn from our experience.
I'm pretty sure, in talking to Tim Ouellette, who's been here a long time, and that the roads that I usually print out are the ones that are older, and that before you had a lot of the controls in place, and some of those are probably done over, because the base wasn't good or something like that.
Right,
but I think in the last 20 years, I think things have been going pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Okay.
other than wear and tear or you know, some unusual. You know, the other thing that happens too, the gas company might go in and dig it up too, and that causes all kinds of problems.
Fair enough.
Or we might have a water leak, a couple of
Yeah.
water breaks, and that could deteriorate it too. So. Sidewalks. For the equipment this year, we have finally getting a sweeper that we desperately need. The existing sweeper, I spend about $15,000 to $20,000 a year on maintenance, and it's well beyond its useful life. And we're spreading that over the CIP and budget to make that equitable. Then the Water and High Street intersection streetscape. This, if you remember, what we've done in the past is we've done the design and construction of the period lighting. It's down there, and I don't know if you've seen it. I think it came out spectacular, really bright. Those are LED lights, so it's really nice. And the people that work down there are very happy with it. This year is redesigning and construction of the intersection, realigning it, getting it in compliance with handicap accessibility and other mobility through there. And then the next phase, which is in future, will be to do the streetscape and the paving and the rest of it, some sidewalk work. And finally, the six-wheel dump. That's our mainstay, and we're replacing a truck with this one with a spreader and a plow.
By the way, what's the big one on the facilities master plan, the town hall?
I would guess that's what's going on right now. So because my understanding is that's under construction right now, and that's why we're here. And the DPW building is under design. And so next year, no, I'm sorry, the construction's already been appropriated. This probably is the DPW. I'm sorry. It's not really my project, but my building.
Yeah.
So I believe that's right. The town hall was already appropriated, and this year it's and we're under design right now for that. And it's probably just going to be the administration building. That's not enough money to take care of the whole garage. Okay, and that's in the rest of the garage is in a future sort of phase 2 of the facilities plan, master plan. All right. My next thing is the Water Enterprise Fund. The ozone system is that's in the past. Everybody's appropriated the preliminary work up to, and this is for the design. Next year we'll be going for the year after we'll be going for the full construction, which is a multi-million-dollar improvement. That'll go a long way to improving the energy use at the water treatment plant. And the ozone system is sort of the base of the system. It's the disinfectant and that takes care of everything that comes in through the treatment plant. The next is the chemical storage tanks at the treatment plant. We're slowly replacing those over 3 or 4 years. And that's all the chemicals that we use up there. And it's not just the storage, but it's also the feed system, the chemical feed system. And finally, we're going to do some valve and hydrant replacement around town. And that's an ongoing program. And the last is the Sewer Enterprise Fund, and that is for upgrades of the various 22 sewer pump stations that we have in town. One of them where in the past the money was appropriated for Race Pond, and that's under construction and should be finished in June.
Okay, any questions? So, we need to make a recommendation on this. I don't know if anybody has any comments or would like to make a motion.
Typically, you follow up the line items that you are voting on. So 6 through 10, 16, 17, 18.
So we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 16 through 19. So does anybody have any comments? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for favorable action or favorable recommendation on Article 24, items 6 through 10 and 16 through 19.
Okay. Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Okay. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bruce,
Good evening.
one quick question before you leave, because it's not directly related to this, but it's indirectly. Catch basin cleaning. Do we do those in-house?
Yep. Yeah,
Do
we
you need any
have,
equipment for that? Because I know that sort of relates to...
we bought a couple of years ago, you approved the money to, now it's been about 2 or 3 years now.
Okay.
So we have a brand new one of those, yeah. And also, there's a plow and sander as well.
And I've got one that's, it is my province specific, but I know they'll be able to give an answer. The worst road that I drive on in the town is the stretch between Brook School on Bradford Street, and then when North Andover takes over ownership of the road, I guess it's owned by Boxford, and it's
Yes.
a terrible section of that road. Pretty much you have to drive in the other lane.
Is it 133 as you go up over the hill?
No, it's
No?
it's Bradford Street or South Bradford.
Oh, Bradford Street.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a section in the middle that's pretty bad.
Yeah, and that's owned
Yeah.
by Boxford. Do you coordinate it all with
No, that's ours. That's, Bradford Street's all ours.
the whole road?
The whole road.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've taken care of the first part of it, and the last part of it, the middle, was going to
Yeah.
require, I think it's somewhere, to really do that, it's $200,000-$300,000. They
Yeah,
have
it's
to
the
completely
foundation of
rebuild the
the
whole
thing.
road. Yeah.
No, I thought
So
that was
that's a big one.
I've been
Yeah.
telling my wife that's owned by Boxford, so.
No, well, don't.
Now she knows.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Good luck with that. All right.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Bruce,
Yep.
appreciate it. Okay, next item, 1755 Osgood Street, Kettle Pizza. Can you explain, Gene, what's cooking here? No pun intended.
Joe Christensen is here representing a client, Kettle Pizza. And Kettle Pizza would like to enter a lease agreement at 1755 Osgood Street. Actually, we will have to look at that. So 1755 is right at the corner of Osgood Street and Bradford Street.
Oh, it's the one right on the corner there.
Yes.
That we talked about that the
Haverline,
last time for a
yeah.
few minutes. Yeah.
So it's right in the Heber line, there's Bradford Street, actually directly across from, on Bradford Street, those homes are in Haverhill. So our town line ends right there. So the building is now vacant. It was owned by and operated by a company called Elcom, and their operation has vacated. Kettle Pizza would like to go in under a light manufacturing use, which is the use that this building has had for the past several decades. They would like, however, to do some site improvements, one of which is, well, Phil can go over the site plan, but essentially there's a curb cut currently on Route 125 that has not been utilized, and there's actually some grass that has covered it over right there, but the curb cut to 125 still exists. They'd like to re-establish that, which Tim Willett has reviewed, and they would need to contact Mass DOT in order to get a permit there again. And they would also like to widen the entrance to Bradford Street. And the way it's been described to me is tractor-trailer activity would come in off of 125 and then be able to back into this load and dock area, along with some other site improvements in that area. The peak volume, my understanding again, is 2 tractor-trailers per day during their busy season. So it's not a lot of activity with tractor-trailers. They'll also utilize box-type trucks for FedEx and UPS deliveries. There's some other modifications to that island there in the picture, but I'll let Phil speak to.
Before you get started, is this an allowed use under the current zoning?
Under the current zoning, no. But the use that has been in this building is light manufacturing.
Yeah, but there hasn't been any use.
It's only been the last 2 months that this building has not been utilized. 2 or 3 months, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah. It has been all the way up to 2 or 3 months ago. So Elcom has other office buildings direct in the zone as well. Their offices are actually relocating to the mill area, and their manufacturing site has relocated, I believe, out of state. So that's what this building had been utilized for.
Okay, no, I mean, it's one thing to have a pre-existing non-conforming use,
Yeah.
but there's no use there now, and it's not a use that's used by the same party. I mean, I don't necessarily have any problem at all with this, but I think there is actually a technical problem.
Yeah, I think,
Did you
John...
get anything from Jerry Brown in writing on the
Didn't get
use?
anything in writing, no.
Okay.
But on situations like this, you know, if that use were abandoned for a year, that's usually then you'd look at it pretty closely. But it's really a continuous use. There's a transition with the company. You know, one company has to move out, the other one has to make modifications to move in. So it's not as if, while there isn't manufacturing going on, there's changes being made in the building. So it really is continuously occupied.
Do they actually have a lease, or they're contemplating a lease?
They have one.
Okay.
What do you manufacture?
This is Kettle Pizza. They make, it's a modification. Here he is.
Come right up if you can sit at the desk and identify yourself for the record.
My name is George Peters. I'm Vice President of Kettle Pizza. We make an accessory that turns charcoal grills, like Weber charcoal grills, into pizza ovens.
So it's
Is that okay?
it's an assembly operation, basically.
We started 6 years ago, and we needed to expand. We wanted to come back to North Andover. We actually started in my business partner's workshop next to his barn in Boxford, and then we moved to North Andover to a small office on Beechwood. We outgrew that in 6 months, moved to Groveland, and we want to move back to town. So
Gene, the square footage requires how many parking spaces? And do that many places exist?
Yeah, we have adequate parking, and it's more than the staff that will be in the building, actually.
No, but I mean, I guess I want to get more specific than that, is how many spaces are required and how many did you provide?
You know, I don't know. It's not something we looked at, John, because it's been there so long.
Do you know the square footage, Phil, of the building?
I do not. Do you
Pardon
know
me?
the square
The
footage
square
of the
footage of the
building?
building?
I think it's close to 11,000 square feet.
So 1.5 per 1,000 gross floor area. So 16 or so.
16. How many are there then?
The site plan.
It's more than 16, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're doing there, really, the main thing is, and as was Gene stated earlier, the access to 125 is really a state highway issue, not town of North Andover
Right.
issue. But the situation we have is that when the trucks are in the loading dock and they want to exit, they'll exit towards Bradford Street. And just because of the length of those tractor trailers, it's difficult to make the turn without sometimes knocking down the mailboxes of the people that live on the Haverhill side of Bradford Street. So
We still want to be good neighbors.
So what we're doing is, if you look at that plan, you'll see an area where there's a darker area of pavement that we want to add to it. And that'll enable those trucks to make that turn and not have to
That's a piece of.
Yeah, that dark area over on the left.
Yeah.
All right.
But if you're backing in, you said you're going to come off 125.
They come off
back in.
125, they pull up towards Bradford Street and then back down to that area you see down there where there's the loading dock.
So you're saying you need to back in onto Bradford Street?
No,
They pull up to Bradford Street, they nose out into it and then back into the loading dock. And then when they leave from the loading dock, they just drive out Bradford Street. And then when they get to 125, they can go either direction.
So what you're saying is that if somebody's trying to get in and out while the trucks are there, it creates a problem. That's why you want to have access on the 125.
Well, they come in on 125. It's easier. If you look at that, if the trucks come in Bradford Street and they come in, how do they get into that loading dock? So it's much easier to come from 125, drive past the loading dock, and then back in.
You're going to have a problem with the state on this?
No, it's an existing curb cut. It was never abandoned.
No.
But we just notify them that it's going to be reopened.
Now, we have a rule on the width of driveways, John. Why we have that? And this is making it more non-conforming.
So the design standard today on off-street parking and loading is a 25-foot width max when there's two-way traffic in and out. So it's currently at 62. This adds another 32 to it. So currently it's 25 feet. And that's essentially, when I had the conversation with Phil, that was kind of what prefaced this, is it's beyond it now. And that's within the parking. So I guess what Lynn's asking is the 25-foot, is that because when people are coming and going, you want a little bit more organization than such a wide entrance?
Well, wait a second. Let's think about this a little bit. When we have a loading dock anywhere, you got to have enough turning radius. It's got to be wider than 25 feet to get in and out of the loading docks. Is it in most places? I mean,
The entrance and
Yes, there's more internal to the site, not onto the roadway.
right.
well, I mean, the issue of using the roadway to turn around is really what the issue is here. I mean, this sort of divorced from whether it's 62 feet or something like that. It's not probably the approach that I bet the police department would not prefer to see it that way. I mean, maybe there's no other choice given the way the property is set up, but it's not what we would normally, if we were starting this over with a fresh building, we would have them probably put the thing on the other side of the property.
Yeah, you're right. It's got to do with the site planning, and if you did it today,
Yeah.
you would do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
The prior use had tractor trailers. You said they just had difficulty leaving, so it's not as if the door wasn't being used, right?
correct.
Yeah.
They had difficulty on that turn coming towards 125 as they exited.
Just, could you section it so that there's an entrance and an exit, and then the truck can use the exit, which is the softer turn?
Going on to Bradford Street or going on to
Right on
125? Without tractor trailers pulling up Bradford Street and then backing in that way, you wouldn't have them. We tried to set it up this way because we wanted to keep the tractor trailers coming in on 125.
Well, the tractor trailer would have to go on the Bradford in order to back into the loading dock?
Well, now they would, but with this, coming off 125, they'll come through our parking lot
Okay.
and probably nose out onto Bradford Street.
Fan out a little bit.
Exit, entrance.
Except the
The
problem with,
entrance would be for cars only?
Yeah, but not tractor trailers. Yeah, they couldn't make the turn. Yeah,
Not for
they,
tractor trailers?
correct.
That's the same thing?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just giving you
Yeah.
options.
Yeah,
If-
no, they,
Do you have a truck turning plan? Because I don't know why we did 92-foot wide opening onto a roadway. We don't allow 92 feet, we allow 25 feet. We're not
It's just the lengths of the truck, as I said, as they maneuver out of there, they have a hard time with
Why
the,
can't we shorten up on the other side?
I'm sorry?
could we shorten it up on the,
I don't know any driveway that we have that into a zone 4 roadway. I mean, you could actually have four-way traffic, I think, between the police department and stuff like that. I mean, I think that's sort of the reason why we get.
I did,
Yeah. I mean,
Could you
could
shorten it up by
Close it up on the
30 feet?
other side, so that way, you're gonna be pulling in and down the house, you can close up the.
Well, I mean, what you could do is, you could actually cut the, you see where those parking spaces are there?
Yeah.
You could actually eliminate one or two of those and make the trucks do their turn all on the property and not go into the public way.
Sure, you can make it internal.
Yeah, and make it internal, which is probably a better thing to do.
but
I mean,
it's exiting that's the problem, not necessarily the
I
turning
don't, but if
around.
they're backed in, I don't see how exiting's a problem. They're
Yeah.
going out.
Yeah,
Do you see where the dock is? Against the, it's
Yeah.
closest one towards 125? When a tractor-trailer exits there, they practically go into the yard across the street now. So we're taking out that shaded area there. They'll be able to make a turn right onto the street.
but
Much easier.
the thing that I don't understand is you're going to come in this way, right?
Now with the,
A little bit
up
higher,
further?
a little bit higher, dock grade.
Right there,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right there?
Yeah.
yep.
So you're going to come in here, why can't you, you know, I mean, here, why do you have to go all the way out to here? Why do you even have to go out into the street? If anything, we should be forcing this to be smaller and not let you put the trucks out there, but give you more room over here to do it. That's what I don't understand, why you can't do it that way.
I said it's really the exiting from the site, John, not the turning around, that's the problem.
If you're faced out this way, just put the thing here and just go straight out.
You don't have enough turning radius there
it's
to
a,
do it.
it's a,
How wide?
How far do the trucks go out from where the loading dock is?
it'll still stay on the property, 60-foot tractor-trailer stays on.
See that 62-foot length? Just flip that around to the loading dock and you get some sense of how far out. So the front end of the truck is almost out at the street.
if the width of the curb cut on Bradford Street is too small, can you shorten it, I think this was this, from this side to go up so that when you come straight out, you're going from, you know, you basically cut that in.
So if we kept it at 62 feet,
Or,
but- but-
just move the 62 feet. Or,
I'm okay with that.
it's okay.
There's
yeah.
not going to be any trucks
no, I'm just
going
I'm just
right on
proposing.
Bradford.
Yeah, no, that could be done, and then we don't change we just change the location of the 62
Yeah.
and not the full width.
I mean, it troubles me, if you take 62 feet from how far the truck goes in, and if the tractor trailer is 60 feet, at normal rest, is that going to go out off the property?
No.
So, but how close to the edge of the property?
On the right-hand, look, there's two docks.
Yeah, the trailers just go to the one on the left.
Okay.
The one
so-
closest to
The
120.
other one is an overhead door for, like
Okay,
UPS
okay,
trucks.
Okay, I was gonna say, 'cause that one's pretty close to
Yeah.
62.
No, it's the dock is,
Okay.
the dock closest to 125 is one for tractor trailers.
But I think we could do that, eliminate that 30 feet of pavement there, close
I mean,
that
If
off.
that would solve the problem with,
Yeah,
it maintains the existing
Well, I think
condition.
There's
Right.
two issues, is one, is this a waiver? We need the police department to put.
Well, we still could waiver with that. I feel like we could keep it going as the process, but we can't finalize it right now, because I think we need some help to redesign that. So, you have any comments?
I don't see how it's a waiver. I mean, if we have all these issues with it, how do we?
Well, I mean, I think it's like we don't have to do the normal
Right, the other.
stuff that we normally do. I mean, we're having a process in public that's addressing all the issues. I think it's an existing building. Let's for a second argue it's an existing use, and we're only dealing with a couple minor things, because this building probably got done before site plan review originally
What
was.
about the fact that it involves another town on the other side of the street and they don't have notice? The neighbors.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Are we supposed to notify them? Sorry, are we
Just asking.
required, or are we?
I don't think we're
do
required,
waivers?
but precedent has been we do a courtesy mailing
Courtesy,
to
okay.
the neighbors when we span either an Andover or Butter or in GovCAM.
Yeah.
So keep it open and send them a note.
We do that for Andover. I think we should
Yeah, I
do
think
that
we
for
should do that
Haverhill.
for
We want them to do
Haverhill.
it for us, so.
Yeah.
Could we also get a police department input on it?
Yeah, I think we need to.
And double check with the fire department too,
Sure.
see if they have any concerns.
All right, so you've seen that there's some other removing pavement, a little bit of regrading around the loading dock to clean it up a little bit as well. So,
Yeah.
again, I would be minor, they're more minor than the widening of the exit and entrance there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. So, we certainly wish you the best, but we just have to do our due diligence just a little bit more.
I understand.
So I think, if we can work out the whole access thing a little bit more cleanly, I think everybody will sleep better.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You get close to 900 degrees when you have your hearing on?
Yes, we do. Cook a pizza in 6 minutes.
Should be 90 seconds.
Neapolitan pizza. Thank you very much.
See how you cook pizza.
Okay, moving right along, our next item is continued public hearing 2302 Turnpike Street Earthworks. We're close to the end here, correct?
Yes. So Rebecca's going to update you. on this.
Okay, excellent.
So in terms of the department review, we've heard back from the Board of Health, Engineering, DPW, Fire Department, and the Stormwater Review Consultant, and all have signed off on the project. The Conservation Commission just last week issued their order of conditions, and we have drafted a decision if you'd like to take a look and review.
Okay, and we didn't have anything that was substantive on our side. There was nothing at all that was open, right, that we wanted answers to.
So the decision is drafted. What we have today is there's some red line edits in it that we based updates from what we sent on Friday. So
Okay.
if you don't mind, use that one if you've already reviewed.
So would somebody like to make a motion to close the public hearing for the site plan review for 2302 Turnpike Street?
Would we close the public hearing for the site plan review of 2302 Turnpike Street, North Andover?
Okay, motion made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's take a look through the decision here. I think you got a straight T in that first,
A straight T.
yeah,
Okay.
paved T, yeah. A wandering T, a dangling T.
That's all I have to, and okay.
Yeah, so, other than that, it's perfect.
And the T may have hung over onto paragraph 4. right at the end of March 1, 2016. Yeah, but I can find it.
I think you got some spell check. If you look at finding of fact 3 in the middle, the sentence that begins hydraulic model, says hydraulic model has been revised to exclude that portion of the pitch rood.
Yep.
At the front, not tributary. I don't know if it's of or what the word is meant to be, but not doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Tenure flow. That's same paragraph.
Is it 10 years?
100-year storm, 10-year flow.
We have to focus on them all. We'll look at that.
Okay. Under 6, the erosion sediment control plan has been revised, probably has been planned or provided to include.
Sorry, where are you, Lynn?
Under 6, first sentence, the erosion sediment control plan. And then it has been revised. I think it was revised, but.
Yep.
But we don't have an existing plan on record, so I have been provided, I think, with the,
On page 5, number 14, permit definitions, you have 2 Roman twos.
Okay, yep.
Let me ask you a question related to the findings of fact, because as I was going through it, I actually really liked all the detail, and it's actually more than we generally do. But there's a few of them, particularly when we get to the end, and the last one's probably the best single example of it, is some of those things read almost like a condition, and so I don't know if in the special conditions you actually stipulate that, because a finding of fact is different than a condition. Yeah. So there'd be 2 ways to cure it. One is that, all the items in the finding of fact have to be addressed, as part of the thing, or you repeat the items in, you know, because at some point, you might, we've come close to reaching the point of overkill, and as I said, this is actually, as I looked at this, I said, I really like the detailed finding of facts. It's more than we, you know, as I said, we usually have, and I think that's absolutely fantastic, but it almost feels it just went a little bit too far.
Okay.
So, but.
Under 9, only business vehicles owned by occupants of the building. I think it's probably a little bit cleaner to say only company vehicles will be washed periodically.
We have this letter from fire department, and I just, to tell you the truth, I missed where that was. Did we put anything specifically in?
Number 12 under the findings of facts.
Okay.
So that came in actually Monday morning, so that was
And it's in the plans?
the auto gate is in the plan.
See, this is, the idea is, there's not a hydrant there yet, right?
The hydrant is shown on the plan.
It is.
Yes. The
Oh, it
hydrant
is?
is shown on the plans. So he just commented they're going to be requiring those things, but the hydrant is on the plan.
Okay, because I was just trying to figure out if there's anything in that decision, I mean, in their letter that's not in the current plans, that would warrant a condition. So, as opposed to a finding of fact.
The auto turn analysis isn't in the plan, but the applicant has done an auto turn analysis, so we can have.
But they've submitted to us, have they?
You've not submitted the auto turn, no.
Okay, then just put that in the conditions that they have
They
to
have to
submit it.
submit it, okay.
Yeah. Okay, is everybody, they're still working, I'm sorry. would somebody like to make a motion to approve the decision as amended?
So moved.
So, the decision on Earthworks,
Earthworks Incorporated, 2302 Turnpike Street.
the special site plan special permit. So-
Site plan special.
Approved as amended. Okay. Okay. Anyone in a second? Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving right along. $254 Great Pond Road, watershed special permit modification. So if you can give us the history, because my memory is short and I've totally forgotten what we already decided to do.
So the applicant came before the board in January of this year, and the board granted a watershed special permit for the construction of a single-story addition to the side of the dwelling, demolition of an existing deck, and addition of a new deck within the watershed. And recently, the applicant had come and requested a modification of that existing special permit in order to construct a 309 square foot addition off the existing rear garage, reconstruct the existing driveway, and to extend an existing porch to provide handicap access.
Everybody else with the locus? Was the corner of Pleasant Street, Great Pond Road, the former Leland house. The Lelands constructed a new house.
Right, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what was messing me up. I said, we did that a long time ago, didn't we?
The new Leland house was probably 2 or 3 years ago now.
That's what I mean.
And this one was recently in for a modification to the former Leland house.
Remember they had a handicapped daughter?
Yeah, okay.
And so
I didn't remember that was the, okay.
we've discussed had Eagleton Environmental review the project, and she has determined that the modifications are nominal and no further stormwater review is necessary. We've also had the project and modifications reviewed by the town engineer, who has signed off on them and has instructed that the applicant apply for a driveway permit. But other than that, we've received all the appropriate sign-offs in terms of the modifications proposed.
With the plan?
Yeah, I'm fine. So Jack Sullivan is the engineer. He can review the site plan.
Okay, I can run from there. My name's Jack Sullivan. I'm owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group, and I'm here with the property owner, Tom Frail. And I think Rebecca hit the highlights of this project pretty good. This is, oh, it doesn't show up on that. The addition to the left-hand side is under construction. That's the portion of this project that was previously approved. They're looking to have a slight porch extension on the front. That's for ADA reasons for their daughter. And then there'll be a 309 square foot addition to the existing 2-car garage. It'll still remain a 2-car garage. A few things. One of the reasons that Lisa said this didn't have to go for further review, I did add a second dry well to capture the roof runoff off of the garage extension. And I also showed a detailed grading plan for the driveway. The reason the town engineer is okay with this project, we're showing no water moving out to Great Pond Road. All the water will be retained onto the site and drain into the grassed area, side areas. And I show an extensive grading detail in the upper left-hand corner of the plan showing how that would take effect, and Gene Willis was okay with that. He didn't want any water moving out to Great Pond Road.
So that'll be an improved condition from today's.
Right. Presently, it does grade out to the road. So you can see I have basically a grass swale to keep water moving off as it typically moves off, but just to kind of formalize that drainage pattern off of the driveway.
Can you just explain when you say the porch extension, what you're doing and what you're doing with the garage, besides the outlines?
Yep, the porch extension is basically 5 feet wide, You can see where the slate patio is, and there's a porch there. An existing porch, they're wrapping it around to the front of the house, and that's for, they want to get ADA access to the front door.
Where's the front door, where the stairs are?
Correct, where the existing,
Existing porch is where the X is?
that's right,
Okay.
that's right.
And is that going to be a covered porch? Open?
It'll be covered,
Okay.
yeah.
And where's that?
Which way is that roof runoff coming then? You're covering it.
I don't know.
Did you account for that in your calculations?
Well, everything that runs off will run to the driveway that then runs out. We're making a big improvement because the driveway is basically staying in the same footprint, but water that presently just ran out to Great Pond Road untreated will now be dealt with on site and sent through the grass swale. And by adding that dry well in the back, I'm capturing an entire roof area that previously wasn't captured. So I think the net is a positive improvement for the drainage.
Can you just verify when you add in your roof, that calculation, just put that on there? That it's going to?
Yeah.
Because if there's no calculation, we don't have it saying it is the net improvement.
Okay.
Then
I think I showed, like I say, hatch roof area to be drained. That's over 400 square feet. So
Yeah.
the porch area, if it's 5 feet wide and it might come out 18, there's only about 100 square feet of roof area being added for the porch.
But 400 feet are being treated, so
400 is being treated. So it's well in excess. Oh, I'm sorry, I actually have a note up there. I couldn't see it even with my glasses on. So
Okay,
I make a note,
110,
hatch
okay.
roof area, so many square feet, the porch extension, 110 square
309.
feet, so there's a net improvement of over 300 square feet of roof area being recharged.
What are you doing to the garage? I mean, I see the outline. But what-
The outline. So I talked with Tom before the meeting on this. The garage is going to be demolished. Even the foundation right now doesn't meet any sort of code with the foundation for the garage. There's no sort of frost wall or anything like that. So it's going to be removed entirely, and a new foundation will be put in its place and then frame built.
Okay,
Yeah,
now
so that's-
demolishing it
Yeah.
within the
We have to discuss
150
that.
non-disturbance zone, it crosses into it, is another story.
I remember
Oh,
the garage was
Okay.
not in the,
I thought we were keeping it. I think, Tom, is that what we found? Is there a frost wall? Is there a way to keep the foundation?
We can probably keep that. It's a concrete stone foundation right now. So, the idea was to expand the garage to allow 2 cars to get in and allow a handicap ramp to come in from the back side up to a stoop and then into the mudroom, which was the reason behind expanding the garage.
Where's the 150 zone marked on this?
right at the, you can look at the top right, you can see the 150.
Do you have a structural plan so
Dash
you
line.
can build off the same
This is
foundation?
it, this is it coming across here?
No.
No.
Right down.
If it's no, keep going up where you
Keep
were.
going up.
Keep going up. It says 150-foot buffer from the high water mark.
Oh,
Conservation
yeah.
zone.
Yeah, okay, that's what I said.
Right.
It's that, right?
But there's also a line right here, 150, which crosses the garage.
There's another line to the right, Dave.
Yeah.
That's from the wetland, yes.
That's from the wetland.
Oh, that's the one.
There's a wetland on the back,
Yeah.
left-hand, right-hand corner.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I remember from the previous, that cut, right near the corner.
And then where's the 400-foot line? Get the whole lot's in the 400.
Right.
The entire line.
Right.
So now, again, tell me, I'm totally at the end of this one. How many changes are you actually proposing? Is it 2 or 3?
Two.
So the thing on the left is what you asked for the last time, right?
Yeah.
It's, you got the Porsche extension, and you have the rebuilding of the garage. The difference in the garage is it's bigger, right, than it was before?
That's right. And also reconstruction of the driveway, so there's 3 things, basically.
Where's the driveway? Okay.
The footprint will stay the same, but it'll be graded differently to prevent runoff from going out to Great Pond Road.
So I'm confused. All right, so proposed one-story addition, that was the last plan?
Correct.
You just didn't change colors, so everything
Yeah,
in
that's
red
what
is,
was
that's,
messing
I'm
me
like
up.
so
Yes,
confused.
thank you
It's
very
all
much.
red.
It's all red, that's what was
Okay.
messing me up.
So, yeah, that's a good point. The proposed addition number 1 in the proposed deck in the rear, those were approved
Okay.
under the original watershed permit.
Can they raise a building in the watershed and rebuild it? I don't think they can in our bylaw watershed, correct?
A new structure,
A new structure.
permanent new structure needs variance from the ZBA.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So if they were to have raised this, and that was considered early on, they opted to just add the addition and not raise the house.
Can they add an addition as that, do they submit plans? That, or are you going to do that? When was that process going to happen?
Some plans have, for the addition number 1 that's under construction, there were plans, there was a building permit issued.
Okay.
Assuming this gets approved tonight, there'll be further building plans submitted for the porch and the garage.
I'm confused. Okay, so historically, what did we not allow the last time? Is anything that we didn't allow the last time something that you're doing this time?
No.
Okay, that's,
Previously, we got hung up on that rear deck.
it was the deck.
The rear deck originally,
I couldn't remember. All right.
we had to angle it because we were inside 150 feet from the lake. We had some discussion about ADA and other things, and then going back with Tom and Nicole, we said, let's just angle it, keep it outside, and then we were able to close the hearing.
Right. Air rights.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned that now you need to satisfy ADA
Requirements for something that you didn't know before you needed to satisfy.
I don't think it's a private home. I don't think you
Private home,
do.
there's
Not satisfied.
There's no ADA.
I didn't
Yeah, I
invent the
know.
term ADA.
Well, I think he was using it in
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
context.
I know, but he's,
That's not our issue either.
well, I just worry about the death of 1,000 cuts. You know, it's been 3 months, and now we've got 3 other addition changes. What do we get, what will come about?
Well, I mean, I think frankly, the one in the front, if you were looking at the impact, that's pretty much de minimis. I mean, you kind of intuitively see that. You could argue that the garage is a little bit bigger deal because it's at the back and it's pushing out in the area that's the issue, but they did recharge it to a dry well, which was not, you hadn't done that before, right?
Correct.
Yeah, right.
And you're also, are you reducing the bituminous in the driveway?
Same footprint, but like I said before, all the water used to go out to Great Pond Road. Now it's being graded to come back to the lot and then run through the grassed areas for treatment.
I mean, I looked at this, that, you know, if this had come through as one project instead of 2, we would have approved it. I mean, I think, you know, you're okay.
I'm sorry,
It's just, is there going to be something else?
This is it for us. We actually,
250 lines down there. Okay.
this is what happened. We got the approvals for the watershed. Everything was great. Tom and Nicole went to get pricing, and they were shocked by how much this was going to cost to renovate the home with the addition. There was thoughts about tearing it down. That we had a meeting with Gene and the conservation agent. We'd have to go through ZBA. There's going to add on more time. So this was the happy medium for what would work for their family, and that's why we came back. But this will be the final plan. They were just shocked at the cost when they got their permit started getting prices to redo it. It would have been cheaper almost to knock it down, but due to permitting issues, it would have been complicated to do so. So it wasn't intentional.
Okay, then, but you're in the non-disturbance zone. Construction of a new permanent structure only after variance has been granted by the zoning board of appeals. So if you're taking it down even to the foundation, it's the same exact thing we had at 1665 Great Pond Road, where they had to go to ZBA to.
So we've got to remove the entire foundation and reconstruct.
That was
So
only
they-
afterwards, they said they wanted to rebuild it on the same foundation, and we made a decision then that they had to go to the ZBA, and then they decided to change the plan and go to ZBA. You weren't at the meeting originally. They came to us once for a waiver.
A waiver of watershed that you required a watershed permit. I don't
No,
think we
we
required them to go to ZBA.
No, we said we were going to make them go, no, we said they had to go to ZBA because they were putting up a new permanent structure. Replacement of a permanent structure.
But they're
even.
not replacing a permanent structure.
Replacement of a permanent structure is in the non-disturbance zone.
Yeah, but it's a structure, what's the definition of a structure? Does it have to be for living space, or,
No.
I mean, it's an accessory to the main structure. It's not the whole structure, it's just part of it.
They're increasing the space.
Well, they are increasing the space, correct.
But even a replacement of a structure requires it. We don't, I mean.
Well, but we already approved an addition.
For an addition, Lynn, we've not considered that a new permanent structure. That's been the reconstruction of an entire house, if the house was raised. So the addition was technically a new structure, but it was an
Yeah, it
addition to
should
an
have been.
existing structure.
I don't think that was the way it was when we modified it, the bylaw, back when we modified it. I think it was, the thing we really wanted to avoid was that somebody tore something down and built something much bigger.
And that's how,
Second-
in practice, what we've done.
But then the
Yeah.
second part of the non-disturbance zone, that is construction of any accessory structure or expansion of an existing structure by less than 25% of the gross floor area. They're going to 50%, right? Over 25? What's the, slide over the right a little
Well,
bit.
Rebecca has those numbers, so I have,
So you're over 25%.
no.
If the watershed, I mean, if this isn't what the intent was, then we should revise
Well,
it.
no, that's you're right, but is it 50 or is it 25?
And for the watershed, it's 25.
25 if your structure is greater than 2,500 square feet of gross floor area, and it's 25% if it's over, and 50% if it's less than 2,500 gross floor area. So there's two different clauses.
So that's
there.
where
So
where
this-
that
so
math came from.
My concern with this is what is being called as gross floor area, and we were gonna raise this. That is living area for the assessor card. So Rebecca has calculated the gross floor area and included all the additions proposed today, and all of the additions meet the requirement of either 25 or 50% based on the gross floor area. But the plan will need to be updated to reflect that. So do you want to read those numbers that you have?
So we have a total with the proposed additions, 815 square feet.
What was the starting gross floor area of the house? And
Right, that just excludes the porch extension, because that's not us.
Right, so what was the starting?
But it's less than 50%. What's the, is the gross floor area 2121, or is it something less than that?
It was 2140. 2140 is the gross floor area.
So they're okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that answers your question, but it's a good thing to go through, because we should look at that.
Well, which number do we go off of, though? Because,
You go off of the 50, it's less than 2,500.
but they came to us at proposal edition 1 of the 500, and then we're at 2,600.
You can't, I don't think you can do that. That's,
Oh, they're stepping it up, I mean, that's the only thing, that's.
I mean, that would be but then it's 2,600, then you wouldn't count the 500, so it would only be the 300 that would count.
Right.
So you
okay.
would still,
Yeah.
you'd still be
Sure.
under.
We looked
yeah.
at it like Dave did. If they came originally, what was the starting point and how much are they proposing to add? And
Yeah.
calculated based on that. Because there is concern over the year. I mean, if somebody put an addition on 20 years ago, we don't have that captured to know that they've already increased it 15% and now they're coming for the 25. It's almost at the point in time is all.
Well, yeah, I mean, we even, I think when we were talking about it, when we originally made the changes, we realized there is a possibility that somebody could game the thing,
Yeah.
over time, but, I mean, at some point.
I don't think that's the intent here. They're doing it
Yeah.
very close and we
Yeah,
included
this
the total.
is all part of a homogeneous sort of thing. I mean, from my perspective, the fact that our consultant who knows our preferences she was pretty certain that we didn't really need to do.
Yep, she reviewed this plan. We sent it to her.
Yeah.
I think we need to change the bylaw. If we're not gonna send them to the ZBA for construction of a new permanent structure, then we shouldn't have it in there. I mean, that's
We
the
do,
problem.
it's a construction, it's for the whole thing, and separately it deals with additions. I mean, there were two separate things. There's one for the total redo of the structure, and then there is one for
But that's not
additions.
See, that's not our definition, though. Our structure, we've gone through this.
Well, I think the intent was very clearly either you take the whole thing down or you take part of it down, and I'm not part of it, but that you add to it, because in the case of starting from scratch, that's one thing, but if you're just adding to something that's already there.
So
Which is
the
why-
definition that we have says, the term structure shall be construed as if followed by the words or part thereof. So this is considered a structure.
Listen, it's
Part
not-
thereof.
I mean, I haven't looked at it and parsed the language, in a number of years, but, so I'd have to look at it, but I think, from my recollection, the intent of what we were trying to do is there were two circumstances we were trying to deal with. Because you have one circumstance where somebody has a house and they want to build something totally new on the property, to basically tear the whole thing down and start over. That's one thing. And then we were saying, if that's the case, then you got to have a variance and a discussion, that's it. And then we said, well, what if in the alternative, they keep the house and they want to add on to it? We said it would be a variance if it went past a certain point, but if it was less than that, then they wouldn't require a variance. They would just require a special permit. I feel pretty comfortable that this fits in with just being an addition. I have to go back and relook at the language. I mean, but, if you want, we can hold it over and not vote on this tonight. I mean, from my vantage point, I'm okay with it, but if some of you are not, we can do a little bit more work before we decide what to do.
I'm okay with voting on it tonight, but I think we need to, none of us were on the board except for you, and so this is, a structure from our bylaws says that they have to. If we don't, that's not our intent, then let's fix it. That's my point.
Okay.
Going forward, let's fix it in the next,
Well,
this is the third or fourth time this has come up about structure.
but if we're taking that view now, that's a pretty significant change, right?
What do you mean?
If we were to say, okay, we'll go ahead, but then let's change the bylaw to make it,
Well, this isn't the first time we've had this.
no, I know.
Yeah, so I just want to fix it once and for all.
What will be the effect of that fix?
If addition, then we'll clearly say that additions are allowed, and any new raising of a building or structure and
Well, maybe we don't
rebuilding.
want all additions allowed. I
Correct.
mean, that's what you're
Well,
saying, right?
that's what I'm saying.
Okay, well then.
I mean, it fixes what seems like a contradiction in how we're doing it,
Right.
but the result of the fix is.
Sure, yeah,
Somebody could put down an addition that's twice the size of their
Reduces the
house.
level of protection, right?
right.
No, you
To
can't.
the public resource.
25 or 50% based on the other two.
Well, 50% is still a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Right.
It's 50% less than a 2,500 square foot.
Yeah, I mean, my personal take is other than possibly thinking the term permanent structure means the main residence, I think this is pretty clear. Because it says that it's allowed by special permit is replacement of any permanent structure, and, whoa, I just still, yeah. And then it's construction of any accessory expansion of an existing structure less than certain sizes. So, I mean, and it's use allowed by special permit, so.
So I think what's driving the conversation here is it's, another example of a property that's directly on the drinking water supply. And so, in the context of that and what the bylaw says, you're comfortable with it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, part of the problem on some of these, you could really make the argument that there should have never been a house there originally. But like it or not, it's there, and you can't snap your fingers and not make it there. And what it was intended to do was to deal with the fact that, you know, some people might want to put additions onto it, and other people might want to, well, what if it burns down, for example? You have to have the ability to replace it. And that's really what we're dealing with here. So, I mean, I prefer that, you know, maybe 50 years ago the house or whenever it was built, I don't even know how old it is, but I think it's older than our watershed bylaw. Was never built there, but, you know, it's there. And I think if our consultant says it's okay and it's not going to create a problem, then I think, you know, unless there's something else you want to add, any other mitigating circumstance to minimize the impact.
Is there any other mitigation that you had considered but is not part of this?
Same as before. We have the deed restrictions limiting fertilizers, pesticides. As I said, we added the additional drainage. We regraded the driveway. I think those, and when you look at this in total, even adding up all the additions, it's under 1,000 square feet total. It's not a huge addition to the home. And with the drainage improvements we made and the regrading of the driveway, I think they offered up, unless there was some plantings or something someone wanted, but I think as far as drainage and water quality, we've made some improvements where none exist today. And there's no deed restrictions in place now, and those deed restrictions offer on the fertilizers and pesticides offer some protection.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah, so, I mean, so speaking from my perspective, I'm okay with this, you know, I mean, it's, yeah, it would have been easier if we had done it all at once, I suppose, and that's part of the reason why we're having a little bit of confusion with this. But, you know, when you really look at it, I think it has a de minimis impact, and our consultant's okay with it. So
what if there's, just for the sake of discussion, what if there's an unforeseen thing, and, you know, despite assurances that I take, you know, as being quite sincere, but there's an unforeseen thing, and we're back here a third time with more changes? No, because we're saying, we're really qualifying this on, you know, this is it, de minimis, and this is it, so okay. I mean, that's how we're framing this.
Yeah. No, and this was my
I know, that's the death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting it's intentional. I'm just saying it's in a very sensitive location, right?
Oh, it is in a very sensitive location, but remember, we are this, it is a special permit. It is not a grant by right, like site plan review is.
Right.
So at some point, we'd have the right to sort of stop and say that's enough. I mean, you know.
I can assure you this is the last time.
Yeah.
I'm sure you don't want to go through this again, so believe me, I'm not suggesting any ill will. I'm just saying that.
Right. I just wanted you to hear that from me.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Yeah. So anything else anybody wants to add?
What will we do? Do we just make an addition to it? Do we rewrite the original?
We have a
No,
decision.
we have a decision right here.
Oh.
It's a decision for the modification. So what we're doing is, we'll close the public hearing on the modification, and then we'll review the decision. So would somebody like to make a motion to close the public hearing on the watershed special permit modification for 254 Great Pond Road?
I'll make a motion to close the watershed special permit on 254 Great Pond Road.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
On the 50% expansion, though, we had said that there's no way for us to go back and track it, but I think it's very easy in our decisions going forward
Yeah,
to
you
track it.
could actually put it in there that the,
It's 800 and this on a bit.
that
starting
remaining
basis of this,
things,
and
yeah,
that's the max.
it can go no further than future, then, yeah, you could
That
put
I
that,
don't
that you
see.
could definitely put in, yes, that's a good, and that would be the way to prevent you from incremental,
Correct.
yeah.
You guys got that right.
You don't get your 1,000 cuts then, you know.
I want to give credit to Dave.
Yeah, Dave, yeah.
You like that, huh?
You like that, yeah.
See, I've been married longer than you.
And I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see that added as a deed restriction, so that way it's public for someone who's buying the property 50 years down the road, nothing personal, but no one would ever disclose they only can add 200 square feet or whatever the number is.
On page 2, the second paragraph, starting with April 19th, third line, and to extend an existing porch. Do we need to be specific? Because there's more than one porch here. This is the porch on the front of the house, on the roadside. And if it were, extend a porch and extend the rear porch, the answer would be no, because that would cross.
Right, yeah, I mean, I think you could say front porch, that's probably a
Front
little
porch.
bit more precise. I mean, we have a plan, so we know what's being proposed, but that's a good point, yeah.
Right.
That's written 3 times.
On item number 6, it says general, non-disturbance, and it should be non-discharge, add non to that zone.
I think you have a numbering thing where your footnotes go up to 8, but you have an intervening paragraph there.
Yep.
I think the comments that Lynn made have to get added to the special conditions. And I think you might want to put something in there is that they have to continue to abide by all the relevant conditions of the initial permit as well.
Should there be anything in here in terms of deed restrictions about not cutting, we talked about whether or not additional plantings were needed, and we didn't respond to that, so we did not ask for that. But should there be something here, not only with the deed restriction on, slow release fertilizer, but, reinforcing no cutting of existing vegetation along that shoreline area?
Well, I mean,
if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit.
yeah, I mean, we have a general prescription against that.
Correct.
So I don't think if we started.
The reason that I ask is we've had examples of people who've done it and said, "Oh, I didn't know."
Yeah. But then
We
again.
sent
they
out our
probably-
mailer now.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
They may not know what's in their deed either, I mean, so I don't think it would be a good practice to start putting that in there, I mean, as much as we'd like to. So.
Just raise it as a discussion point.
Fair enough, fair enough, yep. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion on this? Oh, you're still doing some math here.
I'll just say
You got your
246 is the max extension.
Yeah. So, okay.
For the deed restriction, 246 square feet is the maximum that the property can be expanded in the future, add to the deed restriction. I'll make a motion to approve the modification to the watershed special permit for 254 Great Pond Road as amended.
Okay, do I-
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have now continued public hearings for town meeting articles 9 and 11. And 11 we were going to, which one, was it 9 or 11 we were going to hold over? Because that was technical, I forget which was which.
9 was a somewhat technical stormwater review article. 11 is the article for CDD 3, so I would recommend moving to 11.
Okay. So my recollection was that last time we ended up, originally we were doing this because to deal with the contractor yard situation, to make it compatible with the existing uses out there. We talked a little bit about light manufacturing, but we had an issue with the way the map was drawn.
Yes,
And so can we deal with that first?
So here is, here's the original map from the warrant article from 2008, when the CDD was established. And the lot in question, the circle here, as you can see, 1679 is this lot that has the long tail running right below that circle, closer to 125. So the CDD 3 zone was to not include that entire parcel, and there's notes there associated with that. The map we looked at the last meeting, which is included in the warrant as CDD 3, does include that entire parcel. So in my opinion, it's an error. I think it needs more research, but I looked at the 2009 map, and the 2009 zoning map did look just like this one. In 2013, you might remember last year, I found a couple of map issues when the zoning map was recodified at the town meeting in 2013. Last year, we made 2 map corrections. One was the downtown overlay, a few parcels dropped off. One was Machine Shop Village. And now, unfortunately, I believe this might be another case when that was recodified, that line moved and covered that entire parcel. So it is a subdivision now, but unfortunately, our zoning map today does reflect that as all in CDD 3. So I believe another map correction will be needed. I am going to send this map to the IT director for town meeting so that we will have it for display, if anyone has any concerns. But I reviewed it with the town manager, and the zoning map today does highlight that area. So the map I showed last week is in fact what the zoning map has today.
If it's an error, we have to bring it to town meeting. I thought if it was an error, we could correct it.
Because this clearly shows what was approved.
I was told last year, because
Okay.
downtown overlay was an error and the Machine Shop Village was an error, and they both occurred at 2013's amendment at town meeting to recodify the map.
Okay.
I think it's
Well,
another example.
let me, if we approve something with a map, because obviously you need a map to approve it, and it was right, I mean, we approved what we thought we approved.
Yep.
If it gets put onto the official map incorrectly, are you saying we have to have a zoning change to fix it?
A warrant article, a map correction to fix it. is what we did last year.
I
That's,
think we should have the map on the
So-
warrant article every year, so all over the place, Scott.
Well, yeah, I mean, only in that, let's say we, hypothetically with a text or something, we put the text in and change something. And then when it somehow gets put in the book, there's a typo or like a few lines get left out or something like that.
yeah, so my understanding is there's administrative changes that can be made, and I've run one of those by Joyce Bradshaw recently, the town clerk, and that was the watershed one when the chart showed 150 feet, yet the narrative said 100, and I pulled out when that went into the bylaw for the first time and proved that it seemed to be just a typo. The 150 should have been 100 or vice versa. And she deemed that to be administrative correction, and I was able to make that.
So isn't this the same thing?
Again, last year I raised it, and I was told it needed to go to town meeting. I can
Who
raise
made
it.
the call?
I reviewed it with the town manager, I reviewed it with
Okay.
Joyce Bradshaw.
Okay, but this is what it should be.
This is what it should be, and
Okay.
I can revisit again if you'd like me to.
No, I mean, my personal opinion is we should just be able to correct it and fix any error, but if what's on the map now is something different, it just, is the only difference the edge of that one parcel?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, basically, they never updated the amendment, that's the thing.
They never updated what?
They never updated the map to show this.
The 2009 map matched this, the zoning map for 2009.
Oh, okay, and then it got lost
In 2013, when it was
Okay.
recodified,
It got taken
my
off again,
understanding
yeah.
that the planner at the time had an intern in, and it was really just.
That's much bigger, though. I mean, that's not just a corner of one parcel, that's the whole.
No, it's this,
No, it's just
see
those
that piece right there, you see Stanton Way subdivision underneath it?
Yeah.
So look at the streets along Bradford Street, and then the streets along White Birch, those parcels, and I'll bring up the other one again. Those are the parcels along White Birch to the lower of the circle?
Right, yeah, that's what I mean, it's a lot, okay, yeah. Right.
It's that area.
I still don't understand if the decision was taken, but there was a mistake in drawing the map. I don't understand why we just can't correct the mistake, because the decision has already been acted on.
Yeah.
So I think it is worth going back to check. I mean,
I do too.
what's the downside?
So I talked to Joyce Bradshaw, and maybe she can reach out to who she deals with at the state.
Yeah. Or even town council. Yeah.
Is the map official or is our text official? Which one, if it comes down to which one holds the weight? I thought it was always the text, and the map was more informational.
This text isn't on the map. The zoning map does not have the text.
Right.
Provided for the warrant
Okay,
article.
right.
Okay, so we have that, and that, obviously provides us a little bit of context, so at least we know that the intent is that the district basically took a straight line most of the way. So we know that's clearly the intent. We can deal with that on the side. So let's get back to the rest of what everybody is concerned about here, or not, as the case may be. So what else do we have open other than?
So what you requested, John, was more information on the parcels within the CBD3, and we provided the spreadsheet in your packet that really lists them, starting at the corner of Bradford Street and Osgood. And they run up to essentially the Holt, across from Holt Road, which is 1429 Osgood Street. So there's one use listed on an assessor card, but then in the far right-hand column, it's actually what is there.
Can we flip back to the map and look at this while we're looking at the map? Okay. So the one at 0 Bradford Street, which one's
So
that?
that's the one closest to the yellow, so it kind of comes in and then comes to a triangle point.
Okay,
So
and
that
that
one-
is clearly, even with the change, was supposed to stay as part of that.
Yep, and so that is a vacant lot, and the two closer to 125, they're fairly square, right there.
Yeah.
Those two lots actually had houses demolished on them, so they are currently vacant. And the one closest to Haverhill, that small little lot, is only 7,000 square feet, has this brick structure. It's owned by New England Tel. I don't know if it's functional or not, but there's some small structure there.
And the one right at the corner was the one that we
We
looked
looked at earlier
earlier.
today.
Yeah.
And then
The
as we
next
start
two.
proceeding down, I believe it's the storage company is the next one.
Yeah.
And then 1679, which is the proposed contractor yard. That Chad Lawler is positioning with the warrant article.
Uh-huh.
And then you have Tyler Monroe Landscaping, then it's Yuski, if I pronounce that right, Yuski Landscaping is the next parcel.
Who's guys? Sorry.
Thank you. Then, I believe I'm right, that the next one is a vacant lot, is that how it's listed? And it's owned by Microwave Engineering. It's actually got some pavement in it, but it's extremely overgrown. So I think it's coded as a parking lot, but it's not used as that.
So really, I mean, when you look at this, which is Zero Beechwood?
Right, do you see this cul-de-sac right here?
Yeah.
Going up the cul-de-sac to the right, so the corner of Osgood Street and Beechwood. is-
So that's part of that subdivision we had
Yes.
approved.
So it's
It's
all-
just a lot that's never been
Right,
built
it's
on.
also vacant, and it's actually owned by the same people that own the upper two lots. And again, the man that was in here to permit earlier, the site plan review waiver, when he said he had an office building that he outgrew, that was up here to the right, to the left, I'm sorry. And on the market right now is the one to the right, and that is Elcom's office building with some light manufacturing and wholesaling. And they're moving their office component, my understanding is to the mill area. And so that is on the market, whether for sale or lease, I'm not positive, but I believe for sale. And that's what kind of prefaces light manufacturing use. It's just, some buildings have come on the market recently. A lot of the people that are pursuing them are with wholesale light manufacturing type operations, and where it's not currently zoned. Let's see.
But it was before,
It was
right?
before, yes.
Yeah.
So we also have that one, 1429, which is the original microwave, I think it's Microwave Engineering, right? That has been utilized as a 3,000 square feet of the entire building, which I think is 22,000, has been used as office, but the rest of the building has been vacant for several years. And again, it kind of, when you look at it, it lends itself to, you would believe warehouse light manufacturing could be a use there. We've had inquiries from a landscape company to use it, a self-storage company, recently an office-type environment, but they didn't pursue it. And other than that, those two long ones, that is Green Landscaping, one of which has a resident house on it. I'm not sure if it's utilized for residence or just his office. And then the adjacent long has his landscaping equipment on it. So it shows as vacant on the spreadsheet, but it's being utilized, his equipment is stored there. And then there's some Barker property that is under agricultural type uses, but that large piece there to the rear of those two long ones is part of Barker Farm.
Okay. So what do people think?
Well, looking at that area versus the industrial areas we have along 114, I think they're more appropriate to have light manufacturing in this area than it is necessarily in some of the more residential areas. I mean, so it seems like an appropriate use for the area based on what's going on there. The only thing is do we want to do it as what two concerns is, one is a definition on light manufacturing. We wanted to be able to define it because we don't have a definition for it. What's light, you know?
Was this taken from the existing
Yeah.
definition that we had?
It was taken from existing uses we have where it is allowed, so it's the same language as what's in other industrial zones, just brought into this one.
Yeah.
It's not taken from the definition section of the bylaw, but this use is the same in, I believe, I-2 right now, and a couple others.
I think the only thing we'd need is just town council to write up a quick thing on a definition, so the building inspector has a definition to go over, because there is no light manufacturing definition in our bylaw.
Well,
There is in places.
yeah.
Yeah, there is.
Definition?
Well, if you read it, light manufacturing including, and then it lists a number of things, but you were saying in the definition section.
Right.
Okay, I mean, it's in the text.
Oh, you're saying that is the definition?
That effect, it's a use. It's, I mean, this,
Okay.
I didn't, no,
Yeah, I know
I
you-
didn't
yeah.
understand what you meant, and
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
The only addition to this would be, at some point, you warehouse or store things that you're going to do stuff to, and you store things that you have manufactured for a while.
Warehousing and wholesaling are in allowed use, so,
Okay, so we're okay on
Yeah.
that then. Good.
and light manufacturing tends to bring more jobs than warehousing and wholesaling, so.
Yeah. Yep, good.
yeah, I mean, at some level, we've always said that we may want to come back at some point in time and clean up the zoning because, one of the problems that happens is that everything you tend to do is incremental. So it kind of logically makes sense at that moment of time, but then collectively you end up with something that might not make too much sense in aggregate. I think here what we try to do is we try to respond to demand in terms of market conditions, which I think is the right thing to do, while at the same time ending up with something that is not, sort of a noxious use for the town. So I kind of feel that this is, it clearly I think it makes sense. But we ought to probably at some point step back and look at everything to make sure we don't end up with some contradictions in what we've done,
My
so.
understanding is Erica Forey is working towards that effort, so in addition to working on the OSBOD committee, he was going to pursue recodifying the bylaw and has money in the budget to do that, so
Yeah.
I think, I agree, it's a larger effort than just looking at one zone.
I mean, as we said it when we talked about this originally, is if at some point in time the Osgood thing takes off, there will be pressure to change this to more,
Yeah.
quote, upscale uses. But that's not going to happen until
Right.
the other side of the street changes, if it does. So,
And Lynn, you're working on that committee, so have they talked about looking at across the street as well as part of that?
Yes, we've actually
Okay, that's good.
invited the owners for the whole strip, pretty much undeveloped on both sides, actually. Because I don't know why only one side of the road got looked at.
any other comments from the board before we open to the public? So, if anybody has a comment about this discussion, one way or the other, feel free to come up and ask a question.
Everybody's turning around looking
I
at
know.
each other.
Thanks, okay. So, given that that's the case, what's people's pleasure? Are people okay with this?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then let's, does somebody want to make a recommendation for favorable action on Article 11?
Move the board recommend favorable action on Article 11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we have the official public hearing for Article 16, correct?
So yes, this article is noticed separately from our other articles, and so the legal notice is posted twice, so this is the open.
And this is a different, this is a citizen petition.
Citizen petition, yes.
We had a discussion about this 2 weeks ago, but it was an informal discussion, so it was not a formal hearing, so that's correct. So what we'll do is we'll let the applicant speak first,
Okay.
ask some questions, and then anybody that's here is free to ask whatever questions they want.
So within your packet, there has been some revised language that Brian Bond can speak to, but
Okay.
you do have a hard copy of it, and we can show it.
Good. So, yeah, if you could, that would be good, but go ahead if you could, Brian.
Thank you, Brian Vaughn of Smolak and Vaughn for the petitioner. We're representing Princeton Properties as well as Fregetta Development, who are the project proponents for the Fregetta Development parcels, which, although this is a citizen's petition, those are the underlying property owners or purchasers of the property who would be impacted by this zoning amendment. I believe, well, I've got Andrew Chabin with me tonight from Princeton Properties, as well as Jeff Brown and Bob Boland of Bob with Fregetta Development and Jeff Brown with Princeton Properties as well. Unfortunately, John Smolak, who was before you before, couldn't make it tonight. Apparently, he thought that his 25th wedding anniversary and a trip to Cozumel with his wife were more important than you guys, so I guess you're stuck with me. But by way of intro, as you mentioned, this was before you on an informal basis before. I just want to make a few comments to kind of recap where we're at with what was submitted to you, and then I'm going to primarily turn it over to Andrew to speak as to what their underlying intentions are. So as you know, Article 16 is a warrant article submitted by John proposing a couple of zoning changes. Specifically what we were looking for was a streamlined permitting review so that the multi-family special permit could be handled by a single board. We're requesting that it could be consolidated for review with the planning board rather than having to seek two separate approvals, one through zoning, one through planning. And secondly, we were looking for a height waiver provision which would allow the planning board to grant a waiver of height requirements. After the informal hearing a few weeks back, the project team considered very closely the comments of this board. In addition to that, we held a neighborhood meeting. We did some community outreach and had a significant response to that. I think John has submitted the details of that to you, so I won't bore you with them, except to say that we took the comments very seriously, and we've proposed some amendments to what was initially drafted. I think one of the major concerns that was voiced by this board was that the proposal was simply way too broad, and I think it was raised, but I just want to clarify again that it was drafted very broadly on purpose, just because of the fact that once we're in front of town meeting, we can consider modifications or amendments, but they have to be less broad in scope, and we wouldn't be able to go more broad in scope. So specifically, though, to address those concerns, the amendments that were proposed were to limit, with respect to height, that waivers would only be granted for parcels within the B2 zoning district as a first matter. I think the initial one wasn't limited specifically to that. Secondly, it would be limited to parcels which are 5 acres or more. Thirdly, with respect to the height waiver, it would only be available or applicable to residential buildings, so that effectively any commercial buildings would be limited by current zoning, which is 35 feet. And fourthly, there was a provision added such that the maximum waiver that could be granted by the board would still need to be a 4-story building. So effectively, the waiver granting ability would be enable you to go from probably a 3-story structure now to a 4-story structure, and beyond that, you wouldn't have the discretion, and that would provide, I think, some controls to more narrowly construe what we're looking for to address those concerns. I think the second thing we were looking for with respect to kind of the streamlining of the permitting process, it's just more of a, I think, a modern permitting technique. It's something that has been done, in fact, in this town before both of the last 2 annual meetings. There were zoning changes which were approved, which effectively, with the overlay district downtown, allowed for a more streamlined process. And I think one of the issues that was raised was a concern that we're perhaps trying to avoid discretion of another board, namely the zoning board. And I wouldn't look at it that way. In particular, I would say that in the context of what we're looking for a multi-family special permit, there are a lot of issues which play into the decision that's ultimately made, which are probably most appropriately and more appropriately made by this board, the planning board, because the ultimate decision whether or not to approve a multifamily special permit is going to be conditioned upon all of the issues which are really planning board concerns, the traffic concerns, the site circulation concerns, where are the buildings going to be situated, what are the buildings going to be looking like, and I think that's kind of consistent with modern zoning. Like I said, it's been done twice before, at least in the last 2 years, in terms of streamlining process. I think the one other issue I would probably like to raise was just, we did hear a lot of concerns, obviously, from neighbors about typical project concerns, planning board concerns. When you have a project before you, obviously you have to address the site-specific concerns such as traffic and everyone's always concerned about impacts on school children and such, and they're all legitimate topics for discussion. We tried to outline what Princeton has planned for this property and what Fregetta on the commercial side has planned for the property, and we think it's a really good plan, and we think that these changes give the planning board the tools and the facilities to put a better project on this site than is otherwise available to it. But those concerns probably will never be answered to the satisfaction of the abutters until we come to the point where we're actually looking at a specific project where not only the abutters and the planning board, but even we know specifically what is before the board. This is kind of a cart before the horse analysis. And with that, unless you have any particular questions at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Andrew.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, Andrew Chavin with Princeton Properties. I think really want to focus your attention tonight on the reason that we believe that we're here tonight. And Brian used a good phrase, like the cart before the horse. What we're really trying to determine is, can we give the planning board, in this particular case, some what I'll call 21st century planning tools to be able to look at a development on that parcel as opposed to the existing underlying rules of engagement, which really date back to the early 70s. And we're not asking the board, we're not asking the abutters, we're not asking anybody to make an opinion particularly on a project specific, be that the residential portion, the commercial, the mixed use, whatever it might be. We're really asking the board for two things. One, to give yourselves the maximum, to recommend giving yourselves the maximum flexibility to be able to review a project. You may like that project, you may not like that project, but it gives you the opportunity to have those tools and for it to be able to be discussed in a comprehensive forum in one place, so that an exchange of ideas can happen and that we don't end up with these kinds of things between different boards. At the recommendation of Smolak and Vaughn, we asked for that special permit granting authority to be the planning board, and so that's really what we're narrowly focused here to ask for this evening, which is to give the opportunity to be able to look at this with the most flexible terms later. You may resort directly back to the existing underlying zoning. You may use some of the tools, you may use none of the tools. But really, that's all we're asking for, is for you to consider that under the existing warrant article. To Brian's point, Princeton's been around for 45 years. We're primarily based in the Merrimack Valley. There are an awful lot of developments that everyone can go take a look at. I think we're proud of each and every one of them. We're happy to give tours to anybody. We did have a meeting for all interested parties at Smolak and Vaughan last Sunday. We had a good turnout. We went through all of the potential. We went through the slides that we went through with you folks here last time to show the parcel itself and what we're talking about. But we really have not settled on a site plan. I think it would be truly the cart before the horse. If we don't know what the rules of engagement are, we can't plan the number of buildings, we can't plan the height of the buildings, we can't plan the location. Without that, we can't determine where the curb cuts will go. And from those two pieces, we then have to determine what fits in with the retail and commercial piece. So, in summary, we're simply asking you to take a look at giving yourselves the maximum flexibility and go from there. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has regarding the process, and as is Brian, or anything about Princeton that would help you in your deliberations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any more? I know last time, Chris Huntress gave the presentation and outlined sort of, I don't know if you would call it the constraints or the alternatives, the build-up of the process. Do you have anything further since then, or is that basically still what you're working off of?
Mr. Chairman, it's exactly what we're working off of, is what you saw last time with Chris. We have engaged a full-blown team, so we know exactly which professionals are there. We've looked at the feasibility under the existing zoning or the more flexible piece, if you will, if that moves forward. So we have a traffic engineer, we have a civil engineer, we have our legal team, we have the architect who came before you last time, we have Chris Huntress to help us with the land planning. So we have a full-blown team available to us. And internally, we sort of talk about it as option A and option B. Option A is to give you the tools needed so that we can, make the buildings or utilize the site in the best way we can. I think the most important element that Chris Huntress brought to you last time is the difference in grade between Osgood Street and the back of the site. And the idea is to tuck the residential into the back in concept and to have the retail along the front with some massing capabilities. And if you're on Osgood Street, you're looking to the back of the property, you're only going to see two of a potential 4-story building. And that is the beauty of what it is we believe we're trying to accomplish here by putting the residential to the back, retail in the front, and everything being of a rough scale. If we were not successful in this, we have to go back to the underlying zoning, which is extraordinarily restrictive in its, the way this would lay out. There would be a larger number of buildings. They would be smaller in height, but there would be a larger number of buildings, more site coverage. And if those are the rules of engagement, that is exactly the way we will design the site. However, we think there's a better way, and that's why we're here.
Well, you really, again, to come back to it, you're asking for two things. One is you're asking for the planning board to be the permitting authority, right, because it's a land use board and that's what they do for a living. And then the second thing you're doing is you're asking for some flexibility in the height. Those are the only two things you're asking for here, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
You would still have to go through
full site
regulatory process. Okay.
John, what do you think of the notion put forward here that this is 21st century planning, suggesting that this is, a better in advance, more modern way? Is that your? Can I ask you if that's your assessment?
I think there's two ways to look at it, and I'll be sort of, very totally neutral, because is one way to look at it is that having different boards do the different things is actually a good division of duty. It separates the responsibility, and that might be a good thing. The other way of looking at it is that introduces a lot of fragmentation, and it introduces conflict among boards, and it introduces potentially a bad outcome because it's not an integrated outcome. And where basically the board that makes the most salient decisions on the project is a board that it's not at its core a a board that is a land use board that deals with the things that this planning board does. So, to some degree, it's a decision of who do you think better could make that decision one way or the other, and where do you want to put power. The one thing that I will tell you that I think this version of the thing does, it's dramatically better than what we had before, is it puts the height restrictions into a very, very limited and constrained context, which is, this is dramatically better than what we had before. So that piece of it, I think, is actually, we'll have to look at it and make sure there's no unexpected consequences, but I think it's reasonable. The first one is, frankly, it's a philosophical thing, and, and I don't do it to advocate for more power for ourselves, because I think you could make both arguments, that you can make the argument that it should be separate, or you can make the argument that it should be together. And I think that's right from a permitting point of view. It would be a cleaner process if it fell to one, but maybe that's, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So,
I know the question wasn't directed at me, but I might add, this kind of in some ways came up in an earlier hearing tonight with the watershed special permit. And that's a scenario where it seemed to me, at least, watching, that you guys had a full review and full knowledge of the very specific watershed issues, which are the underlying driver, but you're somewhat restrained. And I've been on the other side of that, and I've actually had that discussion in request of a watershed variance from the zoning board. And I know there's some frustrations on the other side as well, because it would seem like, oh, you just go to the zoning board and get your variance. But I know the zoning board is very concerned when you go to get your variance about, well, how does this impact the watershed? How does this impact the lake? And those are all the very issues that we're dealing with a watershed special permit. But you get kind of caught in that same scenario, and in, I think, a bigger planning context, when it's just one individual residential lot, and it's maybe a little bit easier to deal with, but in a true planning context, I think your points are very well taken, that the integration is a problem. You get in different directions, and you really need a comprehensive review for a project of this scale.
Why don't we, if anybody, okay. Yeah, Laura,
I have a problem with certain language in it. The waivers shall not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than existing conditions. Substantially more detrimental. Like, I don't understand the language that they're using.
I think you can clean that part of it up. What I like about this is that it restricts, it puts all the other pieces of it, I think, are really pretty good. That what it does is it limits the height change to a pretty small circumstance. The last piece of it we could probably clean up. Substantially, it's the last part of it. It's more detrimental to the neighborhood than existing conditions. I think that can be written a little bit more clearly.
So it's not as terrible as what could be there? I don't understand what...
No, I think that what could have served as some of the language that we put in our as special permit things is a better way to write that.
I think it needs to be tweaked a lot.
Yeah.
I'm also uncomfortable, I have to be honest, about the changing up of the balance of the boards. I am. I don't know how I feel about it.
Well, that's it. That's, ultimately, I mean, to some degree, I'm torn about it, because I do not want us, it's not a good thing to put all your power in one spot, but at the same time, here's what could happen, is that the ZBA could approve the use and attach a bunch of conditions to it that really do not reflect decent planning practice, that constrain it, and that, make the argument about which board is better at imposing conditions on land use development. That's really where the argument comes down But you can make the argument either way. I mean, I'm not, it's awkward for us as sort of, it almost should be somebody else that does it other than us, because we have a
So
conflict
smarter.
of interest here,
Yeah.
about whether we have this responsibility or not. I can see both sides of it. I think both sides of it would work, because after some of the things that we have special permits on, arguably could be ZBA as well.
Right.
I think most of the new things that come out that are for new permits, that are uses allowed by right, it goes to the planning board. These just happen to be existing ones that are with the ZBA.
So, John, the way you frame this as it's a philosophical difference, multiple boards versus one, you could maybe say, streamlining versus, multiple boards as a form of due diligence. But you have the hazard here of, which board is maybe, more experienced in certain areas. Is there any way for you to look forward with, given your depth of experience, to think about what effect would this have on the character of the town going forward if this were to be streamlined under the planning board? Is it, philosophically, or is there any way to think about how that might affect?
I thought about it some. I still want to think about it a little bit more, because it's, the planning board may make better decisions on average, but if you give the planning board too much power, is that a good thing? That's really what it comes down to. And I hadn't, really thought through, the risk ends up becoming that you view it as how do you get the project done as opposed to doing the right thing, and that's maybe why we shouldn't necessarily have all the power. Yeah.
Well, depending on the perspective, efficiency versus single point of failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how often the zoning board meets, but I don't think they meet as often as we do.
They meet once a month.
Yeah. See, we've had cases where they've made a decision and then we've done something and they had to wait almost a month.
Well, I mean, there's always
before
going to be
they've done
that, you have that problem with Conservation Commission to some degree,
Yeah,
but
right.
the question is, see, I could argue that certain types of permits that are even discretionary permits should come from the planning board, and other ones not so much. This is one that in the past the town has chosen to put someplace else. We shouldn't take that lightly.
And, I'm posing these questions because I need to hear the discussion, and this is the only way we can have the discussion,
Yeah.
right?
But by the way, is anybody from the audience, would like to opine on that specific thing? I mean, we sound like we're like, not that we're like the people doing the U.S. Constitution, but that's fundamentally what we're talking about, is who has power to make decisions.
So the question is...
Yeah, if you can just come up and identify yourself, or stand up and identify yourself.
So my name's
Yeah.
Justin Hayes. I live on French Farm Road. And if the request is, if I have an opinion on the two boards versus one, I have concerns when, to me, the request to streamline is a request to avoid scrutiny and oversight, and that gives me concerns. They're requesting to only deal with one group, right? And I think two heads are better than one. I think that while there can be conflict, I think that the conflict can be good. And I think that it scares me when people come before you and are asking to just get rid of one group. It gives me concerns. That's how I see it.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Oops, sorry.
Andrew McDevitt, 266 Barker Street. I spoke at the last meeting. I've had an opportunity to speak with Andrew and with Brian and with John Smolek as well. I didn't attend the neighborhood meeting that they had last Sunday, or 8 days or so ago. Again, I want to reiterate, Justin's comments there. I mean, I understand, and from my perspective, the planning board has the ability to kind of look at where the overall direction of town is and where things are going. And the zoning board of appeals, really, in my mind, is the tool and the board that really scrutinizes how we do that, what the restrictions are and what the guidelines are. And I think when I look at this, The challenge that I have is that they're being very specific in terms of getting this approved for a specific project which benefits them, and it now will have a broader implication for development for the rest of the town. And I would say, if it's substantially more detrimental into the neighborhood, we have a vacant lot there right now. This is substantially more detrimental to our neighborhood, to our community, to putting 200 units that are in there. So just looking at this, I don't think they meet the first or the last line.
Yeah, when we're talking about, there's one thing in your initial comments that I would just like to correct. I think you laid it out pretty well. Is under the state law, there's an element of discretion, and in some communities the planning board has more responsibility. In other communities, the ZBA has a little bit more, and there is. The applicant is right. In some cases, the planning board generally does have more of that authority. What I would say is the difference is, and this is an important distinction, is the role of the ZBA is typically to deal with what I'm going to call equities, matters of fundamental fairness and issues. So if you look at it, for example, variances are the core thing that the ZBA looks at, and the idea is when should somebody be allowed to violate the zoning code. And there's stringent regulations under the law about what you can do or can't do. But the point is, it's a matter of equity, really, is what it comes down to. And most of the areas where the permit granting authority is, it is an item of equity. In other words, do we allow a use that where they, certain uses are allowed by right under zoning in a district. So you just have the right to do them. But other uses are only allowed if somebody says, well, that would be okay in this circumstance. So it's kind of a question of equity. But if it's a use that's allowed by right, there is no ZBA sort of thing. So that's where I think it's slightly narrow in what you say, but it's still fundamentally the same thing. Is do you want to have one board that makes a certain type of decisions for you, and then moves it to another board, or do you want it all to be with one board? That's really what we're talking about here. And,
Can I ask a clarifying question? So if they were to go before the zoning board and work through that process and then come before the planning board, and you somewhat disagree with what they want to do and how they want to do that, is there collaboration between the two boards?
No. If let's say,
I knew the answer.
In this case, well, I mean, we've run into that, and see for good or for bad, is let's take a case where the proposal comes forward, and let's say it stays with the ZBA, and they go to the ZBA, and the ZBA says yes. And it comes to the planning board, and maybe the planning board doesn't like it. We have no choice at that point. We have to see it. We have to approve it. In the case of like watershed variances, in some cases where we've had variances, we've said, frankly, we don't see how that variance was granted under the law. But once it's granted, we have to follow what they say. So they go first, they make their decision, then it comes to us. So
even from the positioning of the buildings to everything. So we can't say, well, this makes no sense for the neighborhood. We wouldn't have put it here.
See, the possible what the applicant is saying is potentially the ZBA decision could be so stringent that they've dictated so many different of the features that site plan review, which is looking at how it's actually going to work, we're already limited because of what they've already written in their decision. Okay. That's really sort of what the legitimate concern is. And then, we don't really have the ability to reject what they've already said. Is that likely to come up? Maybe, maybe not. If they came up with a decision that said we allow this use with very minimal conditions, then basically the planning board gets all the discretion, as it probably should, for site plan review. But if the ZBA decides to have 50 or 100 conditions on what's in the proposal, then they've effectively done the planning board's job already. So that's, again, part of the risk you take in this sort of thing. But,
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
This is Mahesh Gopal from 174 Farm Road. So is the question in this round limited to whether there will be two boards or also the concerns of what the project means is open for discussion?
No, the project's not open for, that would be what the board meetings would be. I mean, that's a little bit the problem here, is that obviously everybody would like to see something, and, you know, in this case, it's just not at that point. And so we have to basically wait until we go through that process, either two boards or one board, to review the project, so.
And going back to the discussion of the two boards, my question is, in the way the zoning board sees it, in the way they perceive the details, and in the fashion that the planning board will perceive those details in terms of the tools and everything, is there a similarity? What is the difference? I mean, what I'm trying to see is that maybe they have some more tools which may come up with issues that may be missed.
The difference is, you know, as I said to Andrew, that the ZBA really deals with what I think matters of broad equity and fairness. The planning board, if you think, we have a lot more staff than they do. We hire professional consultants all the time. We're in the land use business. They meet once a month. They do not, you know, other than the fact that they have the responsibility to do 40B projects, because that's what the state law says, they don't really get into the nuts and bolts of planning individual projects, looking at where the curb cuts, site distance, traffic patterns, all that sort of stuff. That's what the planning board does, you know. So if they stuck to just, okay, we approve this this use with one or two minor conditions, it's not an issue. But if they get very prescriptive in what they approve, then that's where there's a complication. Yeah. So it's, granted, it's an open process, like I think the first gentleman said, with two boards, but there is some risk, you know, operationally about the integration between the two. So yeah, I mean, this is frankly, this is a hard decision for us, because I'm not looking to grab, you know, an unlimited amount of power. I want to do what's best for the town, and there's good arguments on either side of this thing. So that's why we welcome everybody's input, because it's a hard decision.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's worth pointing out that the planning board didn't ask for this. We put it forward to the planning board. So I don't think that it would be fair for anybody to characterize this as a power grab or anything else. This isn't anything that was sought after. This was something that, for the reasons that were really laid out, that if we were to go to Board A, and Board A puts so many conditions on, or a variety of conditions that don't meet the overarching site plan review goals that this board might have, we're going to end up with what I call this. And that is really at the heart of the petition. That's really what this is about. So.
Yes. I'm Michael Schmidt at 111 French Farm Road. I would like to echo Justin's comments. I feel like consolidating this for one board and streamlining the process is avoiding scrutiny.
Sure. Sorry.
I'm Bob Boland. I've owned the property for 17 years, and I develop property in the Midwest extensively. I have about 6,000 tenants in buildings I own and apartments I own. I've had an opportunity, and recently moved back here about 3 years ago, I've had an opportunity on at least 5 different occasions to sell the property to somebody who wanted 40B units on the property. And that's a ZBA function, as you know. It's equity in terms of the property. I could have sold the property for significantly more than I've agreed to sell the 10 acres to Andrew, significantly more, well into 7 figures, because I've been on both sides of the ledger in the Midwest. And I found over the years, after going through this process about 160 times personally, that the vast movement of approval process in the Midwest has been to go to the planning board and not have 2 approval authorities in the process, because traditionally the planning board does no more than the ZBA, studies planning, studies neighborhood development all the time, community development all the time, and traditionally has 5 times as many consultants that they can call on to help them in the planning process. The reason I agreed to sell the residential site to Andrew is that I think the plan in principle that he's thinking about, meaning no 40B, and 2 bedrooms and single bedrooms, will be a significant benefit to the community that may not happen if the ZBA is involved in the process, my view, not necessarily you guys' view. But when I look at the ramifications of what Andrew's proposing and the number of school children that most likely will be a result of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, it's dramatically less than, number one, the number of units that could be on the property if it was a 40B, and number 2, had 3- and 4-bedroom units on the property. That's where the school children come from. I've been president of a school board in Michigan for 5 years, and we always were worried in the development process about what would result for the community in terms of taxable income from the property versus the cost of the students that it brings into the process. And what Andrew's thinking is that unequivocally it'll be a dramatically greater return to the community in excess of the students generated by this project. And I just think that rather than going through the 40B process, which nobody is excited about because of all the things I've just shared with you, because I've sat where you are and I've sat in a school board, that a process where you have control over it, I think makes a tremendous amount of sense. And then you don't have to deal with the equity issue, and you don't have to deal with the potential 40B, which I think would be not nearly as good. And I've spoken with my billfold in terms of the process, because I think what Andrew is proposing in principle makes so much more sense for the site, so much more sense for North Andover. And having gone through this 160 times, I understand where you're coming from and what you're concerned about. But we are the ones that have asked you to assume the responsibility. You didn't ask for it. And I just think it makes a lot of sense in getting the best result for North Andover. And all I can tell you is I've spoken with my billfold and taken a lot less than I could have gotten 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or 4 months ago from 2 developers who wanted to do 40B on the site. Thank you.
John, do you have, or does anybody else have a sense of maybe more regional benchmarking? You know, this is interesting to hear here versus the Midwest, but, you know, in the Merrimack Valley, in the Commonwealth, in the Northeast, are you familiar with how other jurisdictions are dealing with this philosophical question?
I mean, I think, and we should check this, but my hypothesis would be that it's evolving more to the planning board because it's more suited for all the reasons that have been discussed, is that they have the background, the tools, the capabilities to address projects like this, as opposed to a zoning board that deals with variances about swimming pools and, things like that on single-family houses, a deck's too close to the property line. But having said that, Gene, it's probably worth, doing a survey of different communities and how they do this and what the evolution is. I'm sure, even at the state level, I'm sure they can give us some insight about that and sort of what the best practice is.
And is there any way to gauge, I mean, just sort of in terms of knowledge of this landscape, of examples of unintended consequences of, efforts to, perhaps modernize 21st century planning, perhaps bring it to the group that has more resources, but, whoops, unintended consequences because of that. And, it gets to that sort of constitutional convention drama that you raised. Is it separation or is it efficiency?
Some of it gets at the issue of, probably anybody that, lives in any community that's a dynamic community, the community changes. So, and you know I'm the biggest open space guy of just about anybody in this entire town, but unless we have an unlimited amount of money, we're not going to be able to buy all the land. So every time something gets developed that's close to where people live, obviously there's a little, oh my gosh, I wish they wouldn't do that, but, people are allowed to develop their property. So, people have some rights to develop property. The question is how much, and, how much do we protect certain uses against, where people live today. And that's obviously an important part of what we do. And I think even all the discussions today have really dealt with that. So, I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. You could talk about conceptually more of the risks that, as I said, I think the biggest risk of giving it all to the planning board is the planning board starts to think solely about how to get a project done as opposed to some of the equities involved. But the alternative risk is that the planning board gets handed a mess that's worse than if we had just done the whole thing at once. That's really what the trade-off is.
Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Yeah.
to further your thinking, the underlying zoning here, this is an allowable use. If we were talking about sort of a zone change, if we were talking about something that was not permitted and looking to go to town meeting and moving that, I think that bar might be much higher, and I think that sort of that separation of church and state might be more appropriate. This is an allowable use that's there, and so really what we're talking about, as I understand it, is the ability to create the best potential site plan. That's really what we're doing here. We're talking about making the buildings potentially taller in the back and less of them, as opposed to smaller and more of them. When you really boil it down, that's ultimately what the difference is between what I'll call option A and option B. Our view is that is a planning board site plan review function, and that's the driving rationale behind this.
But is it fair to say, and I'm literally asking, that may make logical sense for this particular future proposal, but what we're being asked to do here could affect the whole town, right?
No, it's just
No, it's just
B2 now.
restricted to
B2.
restricted in this one use, so it doesn't, it actually, you could make the argument that we should address it more broadly, but this is actually pretty narrow.
This is just.
But I'll give you an example, actually, of where the existing version of the process sort of didn't work, and this is actually probably about the most famous thing that ever happened to me as being sort of part of this board, is that back, if you remember Edgewood, back probably 25 years ago, the applicant went to the ZBA for a permit for a nursing home, they were the special permit granting authority for nursing homes. And basically, the ZBA approved a 250-unit residential project with a small nursing home on it and said the thing was a nursing home, which was overreach of mammoth proportions. And this was before site plan review, so the planning board had literally no authority for probably the largest project that was built in North Andover in 30 years. The planning board actually sued the ZBA, and the selectmen supported it, and we ended up, they backed away from the decision, and we actually created a bylaw to deal with that. So there isn't necessarily, again, this is a totally different set of people, and so I don't mean to, institutionally cast aspersions in the ZBA, but that's a case where they were the permit granting authority and they absolutely came up with the wrong answer, so. Yeah. So, anything else from the audience? Again, we're kind of, it's a little bit different than what we normally do, but it's actually a good discussion. We appreciate people's patience because we are, we're deliberating carefully on this. But if anybody's got any other questions or perspectives, we'd like to hear that before we finish off. We're not going to vote on this tonight, but if anybody's got a question or perspective that hasn't been brought up, feel free to do it.
Ask when will you vote on it?
Probably our next meeting. We have to do it before town meeting, so we would probably do it our next meeting. We still have to, we want to reflect on it. There's some of the language we might want to tweak a little bit and, go from there. So best bet is if you have any questions to call the planning office, Gene, and ask for Gene, and we'll give you an update. So, good. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate you coming in.
Chairman, thank you, members.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't make a big deal of it.
No, it's just sort of weird because it's pre-recorded.
Yeah, I've seen people do it. I've seen, I'm surprised Rosen didn't do it.
That's what's new.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is you come across as Charlotte.
We are
Gentlemen,
fascinated.
you are Varsity Wireless AT&T gurus here.
Yes.
Yes.
Go that far.
Well,
Gurus.
help us out. Did you? I thought you were going to speak up about the last thing. Give us some additional advice.
We have a different perspective. That was going to be our conclusion: is what do we do?
Yeah.
I think the public answered it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've actually had situations where we've requested joint sessions so that the zoning board and the planning board meet collectively on our applications.
Yeah. So, fair enough. So, Rebecca, what's going on with this one? Could you introduce the topic here?
I've only officially met friend Ricky with Varsity Wireless, who is looking to do a pre-application conference for a wireless facilities special permit. The location in question is 122 Foster Street, and that's as much as I know as of right now.
You in?
I actually have a PowerPoint right here, and I thought when you were switching before, if you could just switch the.
So everybody familiar with this parcel? So 122 Forest.
I have that on a map, so I can get
Okay.
that. We'll go to there eventually. If you could just switch it, it might be easier. I'm thinking the next one. Try video.
No, I don't think so. I think she's got you.
Right there.
Right.
Right there.
Okay. But yeah.
No?
Technical wizard. Yeah.
Try
It's
the last one. Screen mirror. I didn't use an HDMI cable. He said to use this one. Try the last one.
I can.
Do you have HDMI?
I do have an HDMI cable if that works.
Hold on, tech support coming in.
Is that the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I plugged that in. Did you plug this into the other side?
Was it projecting just a minute ago? Was that
No,
yours?
no, I've never had it up. I didn't know what connection it would be. That,
These are supposed to be screwed on usually.
I don't know if that was plugged in there.
Do you know which input it should be on?
And then you know what input she puts it on?
No.
Usually I do it on the computer at least.
We have an HDMI.
I have an HDMI cable too, if that works better. Do you not do that?
I do, I just don't know where it would go in there. Let me just double check with that. Usually there's a button for it here.
Yeah.
It's like a display, it's like a computer screen usually.
He didn't give
Do you have a copy of it?
No, we
Let me
just
see if
have
this
a
can
copy
go
of the
anywhere.
site plan review that
I
was
tried
enclosed in
to
the
show
packet.
5 minutes early, but unfortunately we got locked out to...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
good to go? Pull this one up. Flip it around. Good. Nope.
Is that you? No, that's us.
Should be a guy hanging off a tree limb trying to make a cell phone call.
Just give it a sec, go to 4. Sometimes it takes a second. Can you try going back to 1, please?
Okay. We're going to have to improvise.
There we go.
All right, you know, I'll just, the
So we have the
PowerPoint
site
really
plan.
for my notes.
We have a copy of the site plan.
Okay, good.
Okay.
As way of introduction, we are Varsity Wireless. We are a wireless infrastructure developer. We essentially build co-locatable structures for wireless telecommunications facilities. We're very active in the northern Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire market. We have lots of projects under development. And what we do is we partner with the telecommunications companies that you've heard of before, AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, to build structures that both respect your bylaw as much as possible, but also respect the technology as much as possible, because, as we know, telecommunications is evolving very rapidly. And we try to build structures that are very accommodating to today's technologies and future technologies as well.
By the way, could you just identify yourself?
My name is Francis Parisi. I'm an attorney representing Varsity Wireless, and with me is Brian Orlandi, the Director of Operations for Varsity Wireless. Why do we need another cell site in the town of North Andover? The statistics are staggering. You know, over 40% of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts now only has a wireless connection in their homes. Over 70% of the calls that are made to 911 are made from wireless phones. The phones that we have now are really mobile internet access devices. The speeds that we can achieve for mobile internet is far greater than we've ever seen before, and the statistics are getting more and more compelling every day. We have been working in the town of North Andover for about 3.5 years, looking for appropriate locations to build a cell site. And as you can imagine, it's very challenging in a town like North Andover, especially when you go towards the east and towards Boxford, where it's all residential. There's substantial amounts of wetlands, and the topography is very varying. And we've been looking for, there's definitely a need, and as we go through the public hearing process, we'll bring in experts to show where the gaps are and how we project to fill them. This is actually part of a very larger process. We actually have a site in Boxford, just on the other side of the North Andover line, that is filling in a gap, because there's a huge coverage gap in between basically downtown North Andover and maybe a mile outside of downtown North Andover, and within a mile of Route 93, where 95, I'm sorry, where there's towers along Route 95. There's some coverage along Route 495, but as you get away from those corridors and you get into what we would call residential, Boxford and North Andover, there's a huge gap in coverage. And I don't have all that data tonight, because we'll certainly bring that for the public hearing process, but you know, realize that that's what we're here to satisfy. We've decided on a location at 122 Foster Street. It's a farm property. It's about a 10-acre parcel. There's substantial tree canopy along Foster Street, which provides a visual buffer for us. What's that? It's a site. It doesn't meet 100% of the requirements of your zoning bylaw, but it meets most of them, and we can talk about the process. like I said, we've been looking for about 2.5 to 3 years just in this area alone to find an appropriate site, and it's been a challenge. We have a hard time finding land that meets your zoning bylaw. We have a hard time meeting land that is dry, because certainly in that area of Boxford and in West and North Andover, it's very wet. We have a hard time finding landlords willing to rent to us because as you can imagine, any large parcels probably have residential development, and we have to find landlords that don't have residential aspirations in mind. We settled on this lot at 122 Foster Street because it really does meet the zoning bylaw as much as technically possible. Can you just kind of scroll through the next site plan? The parcel itself is about 10 acres and goes back quite a ways off of Foster Street, and there's a very traditional farming operation going on there, and that long building is a horse barn, and then there's some horse paddocks in the back of it. The problem with the site is that there's a very substantial elevation change, and some of the other site plans, we don't have to go there, but there's a very dramatic elevation change as you go back towards the property. So even though we probably would have all liked us to go farther back on the property for visibility perspective, it's really not technically feasible. We're at the edge of a very dramatic drop-off, and to travel even 50 feet back would be a 100-foot elevation difference, and it goes back dramatically from there. So we've really found not only one of the only viable lots, but the only viable location on the lot, which becomes a challenge. The other thing, one of the things that your zoning bylaw requires is that we try to camouflage these facilities as much as possible, and we put a lot of thought and effort into the design process. And what we're going to propose is what we call a faux pine tree. We call it a monopine in the industry. It's similar to a site that we have under development in Boxford, and it's just it's the most appropriate that we can do under the circumstances. This is not an industrial area. This is not a commercial area, but it's still a heavily forested area. So we can design it in such a way, and we'll provide ample detail at the public hearing process with faux bark and faux pine needles.
Better than the famous one.
Absolutely.
The Hutchinson.
The Hutchinson.
Right.
You know,
and one of the issues, the issue, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I know where you're going with that.
Yeah.
It's all a matter of perspective and location, and the reason why that is so noteworthy is because it's in the middle of the highway, and you've got 4 lanes of asphalt in front of you, and you don't have a tree in front of you till you see that right over there. Whereas, and we'll go, as we go through the development process, we'll show you that you're not going to have that perspective here, because as you're driving down Foster Street, you're going to be looking at a bank of trees, and there's going to be something taller over here, but you're not looking at it. One of the things that we will do during the process, as required by your zoning bylaw, is that we'll put a balloon up in the air, we'll advertise it, we'll tell the planning board, we'll notify abutters, we'll put it in the newspaper, we're not trying to hide it. And then what we can do is take pictures, and I'll take as many pictures as the board wants. If you tell me where certain sensitive areas are, we'll take pictures from there. And then what we can do is a photo simulation and show what it's going to look like. And you'll see in a lot of places along Foster, even though this is going to be quite tall, you're not going to see it. It's going to be taller than the trees, but I really think along Foster Street you're not going to see 100 feet of pine needles like you do on the Hutchinson. You might see a little bit, but it's going to work, and we will certainly have time to prove that during the process.
Will you complete that process before the leaves fall? Because I know that section, and you've got a lot of trees, but when they lose their leaves, you've got more visibility than you do in the summer.
What we've found, and certainly on the property here, it's mostly evergreen out that way. So unfortunately, given the timing of the year and our application process, we probably won't get a balloon up before the leaves go on the trees, but I don't think it's going to make a dramatic impact. And We know this process is going to take a while. We might as well jump into that question, because in light of the last discussion, we need certain dimensional variances. One of the requirements of your zoning bylaw is that we only be 10 feet above the trees, and that's just technically impossible. And we'll bring all kinds of experts in to prove that, but I need to go to the zoning board for that. In addition, your bylaw requires, it's very typical for most zoning bylaws to require what we call tower height setback, that the tower be set back from the property line a distance equal to the height of the tower. Your bylaw requires 2 times tower height setback, and that's just technically infeasible. We can't find any place. And in addition, it requires that we be 600 feet from residential property lines. Well, all of western Boxford, all of western North Andover is residential. We're in a residential zone. And I think if we surveyed, we wouldn't even find a lot out there that would meet that requirement. Most towns have what I feel is a reasonable setback equal to tower height, but we're going to need a dimensional variance from those 2 provisions.
Fair enough.
So, and I think we can prove the infeasibility, we can prove the non-necessity of that, but I need to go to the zoning board for that. And one of the questions that I have, certainly in light of the last hearing, was which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I'm not as concerned as they are. And the reason why is because we have federal law that kind of overrides the process. They don't. They don't want to get a variance. We have ample case law that says that variances are easier. It's an easier legal standard for a zoning board to grant. So I ask you guys, what should I do first?
I mean, my personal opinion is in this case, you probably should go to them first. I don't know what you guys feel, but I think that there are some cases where we've heard it first and then said go to them, conditioned it that way, but the problem is we technically can't even hear something until the variance is
Well, can I make a suggestion? It's certainly some of the things that actually you said. The planning board has all of the discretionary jurisdiction here. They're the special permit granting authority. They have to look at a much bigger issue, a much bigger picture. And really, the biggest thing that I think is going to come, the biggest issue is going to be visibility, which is also a function of height, and certainly in my case, which is really what I need the dimensional variance for. So what I would suggest is that we start the process with the planning board. And I apply concurrently. I have the first public hearing with the planning board. I don't expect that you're going to approve it on the first night. And then we go to the and then we go to the zoning board. And I'm going to tell you what happened when I went to Boxford. I had a 5-foot encroachment on a wetlands buffer. And so they said, go to the Conservation Commission first. And we went to the Conservation Commission and said, we're going to build a wireless telecommunications facility. We have a 5-foot buffer. And they gave public notice, and the public showed up to the Conservation Commission and said, how tall? What's it going to be? And they asked 1,000 questions that the planning board was very able to answer and to address, and as you said, got consultants, but the Conservation Commission froze. And then we did a site visit, and it was it got a lot of scrutiny, and there were neighbors that came out, and we were showing them the 5-foot wetlands buffer, and we were on site for about 6 hours because they were asking, what's it going to look like? Where's it going to be? And it just was putting the wrong board first. And so it would be my suggestion that we open the process with the planning board and not close it till the zoning board is done, but at least you guys ask the questions first. And I think if the zoning board sees that, it might be smoother. And the other alternative would be to try to coordinate a joint meeting. And we did this very successfully in several towns. And it takes a little bit more time to coordinate, but it ultimately proves more efficient, because sometimes you get a situation where one board doesn't want to act without the other. And you guys say you can't act without the zoning board, but the zoning board might not want to act because you guys have the real discussion items, And so you get in a situation where no one wants to act, as opposed to people conflicting with each other.
I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, one is, what's the timeline on the review? We don't want to get stuck where the meeting was open and then we're
Well,
forced
no,
into a
we're a
decision.
special permit, it's not a clock. The reason why we had the problem on that other thing
It ended up
is
not being a special permit,
it
right?
was a
Okay,
different
so-
type of
okay.
permit, so
Just
there
making
was
sure.
a clock.
That's a legitimate question. I will tell you, there's some federal law that you need to be conscious about with respect to timing for wireless communications
Okay, so
facilities.
there is.
But I will also tell you that I'd almost be willing to waive that.
We have the ability.
Okay, we'd want that, yes.
And, well, if we were doing this cooperatively, if you said it's going to take me 6 weeks to schedule a joint meeting, and it was more efficient for me to go to one meeting, I'd certainly agree to that. If we're, and I know you guys meet more regularly, the zoning board meets infrequently. It's going to be a challenge, but I suspect it will be more efficient. I'm not asking, like the previous applicant, that we give you guys all the authority or we go to the zoning board. I know I need both. But I'm just trying to figure out the most efficient way to accomplish it.
I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, the other thing I want to, I mean, the issue about like joint meetings, I mean, my schedule is so crazy. I got graduations coming up. I'm not looking to take on a bunch of extra meetings. I can't do it. So, I don't, that scares me. Well, doing joint meetings and having
No, but how
extra
about
meetings.
the notion of sort of, doing things a little bit in parallel, but teeing up with us first, then going to
I'm
them,
fine
and
with that.
coming
Just,
back
I don't.
to- Yeah.
I think it opens the door, certainly, so that if a question is raised that is a planning board related question, there's some place to go, which is really what.
Especially because height and visibility, in my mind, are the same thing. But you have two different boards asking the same thing. I think and I think visibility is the more discretionary, height is the absolute. And your discretion is going to be important to the zoning board's decision.
I don't know, what if the zoning agreed to come on one of our days, since they have less meetings, a lot of times they have nothing else on the agenda. If you can convince them.
And that's how we did it in another community, is the zoning board actually met on the day that the planning board met.
I mean, yeah, just in the general sense, actually, probably the best way to establish a better rapport with them is to actually meet with them, because I think you tend not to have as much appreciation for the difficulty of the other person's work, but if you actually see it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's why those guys are asking those questions that they are. That sort of makes sense. So maybe we do it at a planning board meeting sometime. It's not a bad idea. But Pete, what do you think? Open to it. So Dave?
Yeah, I like the idea of inviting them, or we could have our meeting at their place, but they don't meet on Tuesdays, do they?
No.
They can hold a special meeting. It just requires notice. And so I'm going to, and it's certainly in light of what Ms. McCherry said,
would you
invite them to your meeting? And I think, they have, because they meet, they don't even meet regularly. They only meet as necessary. What's that? Yeah, and what you do is you open both public meetings. You let me talk and talk and talk, and everyone asks questions, but everyone hears everything at the same time. I'm telling you, it's more difficult to schedule, but it's more efficient in the long run.
I mean, you obviously know in some respects, even much more than us, that this is a topic that fosters a lot of emotion in
Absolutely.
people. I mean, I can tell you from experience, probably the most heated discussions we've ever had at this board have been regarding this topic. I mean, it's borderline crazy. I mean, but
I'm not going to hide it. We're in the town of Oxford too. I encourage you to talk to the folks in Boxford. But at the same time, I just finished a project in the town of Sherburne where we did that, and we tend to take on the more challenging towns and the more challenging situations, and we've been very successful. We're in Sudbury, and that's working out very well because there was some cooperation between the zoning and the planning board. Some of the nicer residential towns we've had success, and I think one of the things that we're noticing is perception is changing. 10 years ago, people didn't know what they were getting. Now, it's pretty easy because there's so many examples. You can see what you're getting very easily. I can do very good photo simulations. And people want their cell phones. And, it's become an amenity to the town as opposed to a detriment. And people are we've had a lot less backlash than in years past.
So, have you filed with us yet?
No. Your zoning bylaw requires me to do this, to come and just
thank
introduce.
you. We appreciate it anyway, the coming in with the spirit that you have. Yeah.
And I suspect what we'll do, I'm going to file an application for both at the same time.
I
Zoning
think
board,
you
planning
picked
board.
up from the feedback. We're amenable to that. Yeah.
And if I can coordinate with the staff and try to organize that, that's great. If
If
not,
we can, we can. If we can, we can.
If it's not, I'm gonna try to schedule it so that the planning board's the first meeting. And I just don't want you to take the position that you can open the hearing. Maybe you can't close it till the zoning board rules, but I just want to come to you guys first.
Yeah.
And for the same reasons that these guys were saying, it's the same concept. You guys, if there's gonna, between the professionals that you have and other resources that you have, you're gonna be able to make a much more informed decision than the limited jurisdiction of the zoning board. So that's it. I apologize. I had some pictures and aerial photos and stuff that the technical didn't work.
Funny cartoon.
But
I'm sure they were brilliant.
this is the other thing I wanted to ask you. One of the requirements is that we put a balloon in the air, and what I find that the best thing to do is to apply, and then schedule it, and then have it up in the air before the first public hearing, and what. That way, when we advertise the public hearing, we can advertise the balloon.
Yeah.
When we send out abutter notices, we can advertise the balloon. And the only thing I really want to know is, would you prefer a Saturday or a weekday? Most towns like Saturdays. You know what? When I ask these guys, they always say Saturdays. When I ask these guys, they always say weekdays.
I would say Saturday, so when they call you, you're not there to say,
Right.
what's that balloon in the sky?
It doesn't matter to us. I just we kind of would need to coordinate it, and I have to ask a question now before the first public hearing. So I might not see you guys again until after I can come in with nice photographs.
For residents and Saturday, I think.
Yeah. And what we'll do, we'll advertise Saturday. Balloons are kind of fickle with the weather, so we'll advertise a couple of dates just in case it's Saturday. But it'll be a weekend as opposed to a weekday.
It's a wind delay.
Yeah. And I think, half the reason we like to tell people is because they're not as visible as people think they're going to be. And if they see it or they can't see the balloon, they don't get as concerned. So it's helpful to just tell as many people as possible.
Okay, very good. Great.
Gene, how many are on this butter list? I mean, do you have any idea?
We've even done it yet.
Okay, you've done it, okay.
It's a big lot, but all the other lots in the area are pretty big too. So I can't imagine it's going to be more than 15.
Okay.
We had those fake pine trees along the Northway in New York.
Yeah.
Going from Albany up toward Montreal.
Right.
There was, you couldn't have that. The Adirondack Society would not permit that until somebody ran their car off the road and died because they couldn't get a signal.
I worked with Dean on those McEntee back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
It was quite a process. Dean was quite an advocate because I think he was actually related in some way to the person that drove off the ditch and maybe sat there for 4 or 5 days.
The pine trees, they work in very specific locations. There's actually 2 in Berlin, and one's right up against 495. You've driven by it 100 times, and you've never seen it because it's kind of in a slope and there's green behind it. And unfortunately, they also built one in Route 2. In the median of Route 2. Is it Harvard or Berlin? Unfortunately, that one is far more visible. So it was not, I think they thought, well, it worked so well in one.
That was actually one of the first ones.
Yeah. But I think, like I said, we'll have ample photographs. The process can
Great. Excellent. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So somebody want to approve the minutes? We'll pass on the CPC stuff. We'll do it next meeting. It's okay.
We're going to approve that right now.
Or if everybody trusts me.
Yeah.
Article 9, yeah. What's Article 9?
We put that aside.
Yeah. But do we have to, what is that one anyway?
It proposes within site plan review to reference the stormwater and erosion control bylaw, which is in chapter 160 of the
Okay.
town bylaws.
So that's a technical fix. So
Yeah.
somebody want to make, is everybody okay with that one?
Sure.
Yeah, so make a recommendation for favorable action, you make a motion, right?
What article is it?
Article 9.
I'll make a recommendation for favorable action on Article 9.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, the minutes?
I had a couple. One, 2302, I didn't print it. I don't know what line it is, but it's 21 pages. I'm not printing it.
Well, that's because of the...
I know.
Can you get those changes?
2302 Turnpike, on the wash station, they stipulated to agree to that restriction. 1665 on the sprinkler, it said the North Andover Fire Department would make the determination if they needed sprinklers or a wider driveway. They can actually elect, not, we just have, North Andover Fire Department has to approve it.
Hey, man, I've got that if you need it.
No, you want your reimbursement for your...
No, this isn't covered.
And on, what address is it? Wherever the Learjets are, it is a typo. It was L-I-R-E, it should be L-E-A-R.
I got that.
Okay. But with those, I'll make a motion to amend the meeting minutes of April 5th.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes as amended. Second. Motion made second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, now it's our time to go out of regular session and to tell those fellows that we're, okay.
I move to go into executive session for consultation with town council for confidential legal advice and to discuss litigation strategy in the case of 1600 Osgood Street LLC, and the chair to declare that an open meeting would be detrimental to the town's litigation strategy and not to return to open session.
So that's the motion.
Second. John, declare that.
Okay, you declare that?
No, do you declare that?
Okay, I declare that. Who declares that? Me?
The chair.
Okay.
Declare that.
Okay, so I do declare that we are going to do that for that motion, so do you...
Second.
Okay, you second it. And then vote? We'll start on this side.
Laura McSherry, aye.
Dave Kellogg, aye.
John Simon's aye.
Len Rednicki, aye.
Okay. So let's make sure we're turned off.